His son refused to pick him up from the airport. The father, a retired widower, waited in the cold, alone. An hour later, the son texted, "Busy day, Dad. Get an Uber." That night, the father came home to find the luxury car his son drove, still registered in his name. By Monday morning, that car would be gone, sold. And for the first time in years, the father wouldn't feel forgotten. He'd feel in control. Before the story begins, tell me, where are you watching from? I hope your day is gentle and calm. Please like, subscribe, and let's start our story together. The hum of the jet engines fades as Edward Grant steps off the plane into the sterile brightness of Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. The loudspeaker crackles overhead, announcing arrivals, reunions, and delays, but his world feels muted. His knees ache from the flight, his shoulders from the weight of his worn duffel, a relic from another life, when discipline and brotherhood meant something. He's just returned from visiting an old army buddy, the kind of man who still remembers favors, who still returns calls. He thumbs open his phone and types the message carefully, like he always does. Landed. You on the way? He waits, watching the three dots that never appear. The crowd thickens around him. Hugs, laughter, rolling suitcases, children running into waiting arms. Edward stands alone at the edge of all that warmth, the overhead lights gleaming off his thinning gray hair. Minutes slide into half an hour, then an hour. Finally, his phone buzzes. "Dad, busy day," Kyle's voice says, breezy and efficient, the tone of someone juggling more important things. "Grab an Uber, it's 20 minutes. Edward says nothing for a second too long. He hears chatter in the background, colleagues, maybe music. "Sure," he replies, voice flat, clipped. When the call ends, the silence presses in. Outside, the Minnesota cold bites through his jacket. He joins the long line of rideshare passengers, suitcase handle rattling behind him. Steam curls from nearby vents, the air thick with exhaust and impatience. He watches families reunite, a young father lifting his daughter, a college kid hugging his mother. Every smile is a mirror to what he no longer receives. A car pulls up, headlights cutting through the sleet. The driver leans out the window, glancing at his phone. "Edward Grant?" Edward nods, loading his suitcase into the trunk. "Where to?" the driver asks, tapping the GPS. Edward stares out the windshield for a long moment. "Home I built," he says quietly. Then, almost to himself, "Not sure who lives there now." The driver doesn't ask questions. The car hums forward through suburban streets, slick with snowmelt. Houses pass by, tidy lawns, trimmed hedges, glowing windows, filled with laughter. Edward's reflection stares back at him in the glass. Tired eyes, steady jaw. A man built from decades of work and compromise. When they turn down, his old street, something tightens in his chest. The maple trees he planted decades ago now tower over the sidewalks, roots pushing up the concrete he poured himself. He remembers Kyle's first bike ride down this very road, the boy wobbling until Edward's hand let go. The Uber slows to a stop in front of the house. Edward peers through the window. The siding's been repainted a trendy gray, new porch furniture he doesn't recognize. And there, in the driveway, sits a sleek black BMW, snow glistening on its hood. His son's car, his name on the title. He pays the driver, steps out into the biting air. The house looms in silence, its windows glowing faintly behind drawn curtains. He grips the handle of his suitcase, the rubber wheels crunching on the icy drive. Inside, he can hear music thumping faintly, laughter spilling from somewhere deeper in the house. He doesn't knock. He stands there for a moment, staring at the familiar door he once stained himself, the same brass handle Maggie used to polish every spring. He exhales slowly, the air fogging before him. For a heartbeat, he's not angry, just hollow. That's the thing about neglect. It doesn't scream. It corrodes quietly. Edward steps back, eyes fixed on the BMW. The reflection of the house trembles faintly in its glossy paint. His face looks older, smaller, half erased by the curve of metal and light. He drags his suitcase toward the side door, the key still fitting perfectly in the lock. The faint laughter continues somewhere inside, muffled by walls that used to echo his voice. The door clicks shut behind him. He doesn't speak. He doesn't sigh. He just stands in the dim entryway, the familiar scent of wood polish and cologne wrapping around him like a ghost. The hurt settles deep, not loud, not sharp, just a weight he carries in his chest. And in that stillness, before anyone notices he's home, something changes in him. The warmth that once defined the word father begins to cool. The camera lingers on his face, unreadable, steady, quietly breaking, as a muted chord of music fades under the sound of the winter wind outside. The first fracture has formed. The door opens to a wave of laughter and bass. Edward steps inside, blinking against the sudden brightness. The living room smells like perfume and spiced rum, too much of both. Music thumps from a Bluetooth speaker perched on the mantel, where his old clock used to tick softly every evening. Now, strangers fill the space he once called home. Kyle stands near the kitchen island, shirt untucked, glass in hand, surrounded by friends who look young enough to still believe everything can be bought back later. Amber, tall and sharp-eyed, perches on the arm of the couch, laughing at something one of them says. None of them notice the older man framed in the doorway, suitcase still in hand. Edward sets his bag down beside the coat rack, quietly, the way a guest does when they're not sure they're welcome. The sound is swallowed by the music. He takes a slow look around. The old rug is gone, replaced by a sleek gray one. The family photos that once lined the wall have been replaced by minimalist art prints. Even the air feels different, filtered and hollow. Amber is the first to see him. "Oh, your dad's back," she calls over the music, tone half surprised, half awkward. "You should text him next time." Kyle glances over his shoulder, a flash of recognition passing through his face before fading into indifference. "Guy likes independence," he says, smirking faintly. The group laughs, not cruelly, just carelessly, the kind of laughter that cuts deeper because no one realizes it does. Edward gives a polite nod, though no one's really looking. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't belong in the rhythm of their evening. Instead, he picks up his bag and moves down the hallway, steps muffled by the new carpet. His old study door creaks when he pushes it open. The smell hits first: alcohol, lime, and something faintly chemical. The sturdy oak desk, where he once balanced ledgers and letters, has been replaced by a polished bar, stocked with gleaming bottles and crystal glasses. Shelves that once held Maggie's novels now display liquor labels and neon light strips. He stands still, hands in his pockets, looking around like a man visiting the museum of his own life. The laughter from the living room muffles into a distant echo. For a moment, he feels like he's intruding in his own house. His new room is across the hall, small, square, barely large enough for a bed and dresser. The curtains are mismatched, the sheets plain white. It's tidy but temporary, like a hotel stay. He sets his suitcase on the bed and exhales slowly, shoulders sagging. Then his gaze lands on the framed photo on the shelf. Maggie, smiling in sunlight, her eyes crinkled in that way he still dreams about. He picks it up gently, thumb brushing the glass. For years, she was the bridge between him and their son, translating their stubborn silences into forgiveness. Now, without her, the air between father and son has curdled into something cold and familiar, like winter settling in through an open door. From the other side of the wall, Kyle's laughter bursts again, louder this time. The sound rattles the picture frame slightly. Edward steadies it. "You'd tell me to let it go," he murmurs to Maggie's photo. "You always did." But his reflection in the glass looks older, heavier, unwilling. Later that night, long after the music dies and the last car door slams outside, Edward sits alone at the small writing desk near the window. The house has gone silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. He opens a worn, leather-bound journal, Maggie's. Her handwriting still loops across the first pages, the ink fading, but the warmth intact. He turns to a blank page and begins to write, his pen slow but steady. He forgets who drove him home all those years. The words hang there, half confession, half indictment. He sets the pen down and closes the journal, the faint creak of leather echoing in the quiet room. The porch light outside flickers once before steadying again. Edward looks toward the hallway, where faint shadows move under Kyle's door. His jaw tightens, Not in anger, but in realization. This is no longer their home. It's his son's house now, and he's just another guest passing through. He turns off the lamp. Darkness folds in around him. The silence feels heavier tonight, the kind that doesn't end, only waits. The next morning, frost clings to the windows of Edward's kitchen. The coffee pot burbles quietly, the only sound in a house that feels like it no longer speaks his language. He sits at the table in his robe, flipping through the morning mail, bills, advertisements, and one thick envelope from the insurance company. The bold letters across the top read, "Vehicle Policy Renewal." He frowns. The policy number looks familiar. He sets down his cup and stares at it for a moment before pulling out his phone. A few taps later, he's scrolling through old bank statements, monthly payments, auto-deducted, steady as a heartbeat. He's still paying for the BMW. A knock on the back door interrupts his thoughts. Beth Collins steps in, wrapped in her green winter coat, cheeks flushed from the cold. She doesn't bother knocking twice. She's been crossing that same threshold for 30 years. "You look like a man doing math he didn't plan to," she says, slipping off her gloves. Edward slides the papers across the table. "I'm still paying his car insurance after all this time." Beth raises an eyebrow. "You sure?" He nods. "Policy's in my name." She pours herself coffee without asking. She never has to. "Maybe it's time to see what else is in your name," she says gently. That night, when the house is quiet again, Edward opens the filing cabinet in his old study, now the bar. He pushes aside bottles of whiskey to reach the drawer underneath, pulling out a manila folder marked Vehicle Title. The edges are worn, the paper inside crisp. He unfolds it under the desk lamp, light spilling across the page. There it is in black ink. Owner, Edward Grant. No cosigner, no lien, no Kyle. He stares at it for a long moment, his jaw flexing once. The paper crinkles slightly between his fingers. The flashback comes uninvited. 3 years ago, a hospital room lit by soft fluorescent light. Kyle's arm in a sling, his face pale and sheepish after the crash. "I can't lose my job, Dad," he'd said, eyes down. "I'll take over the payments soon as I'm back on my feet." Edward had nodded, proud even then. He'd gone to the dealership the next day, signed the papers, written the checks. He'd told himself it was temporary. A father helping a son. That's what family does. But now, under the yellow lamp, glow, the numbers tell another story. There's no trace of repayment, no evidence of soon. Just the steady withdrawals from Edward's account. 3 years of them. He exhales, long and measured, the way soldiers do when realizing a line's been crossed without warning. His eyes flicker to the bar shelves where the old books used to be, their replacements gleaming with amber and glass. Every bottle there had been bought with money he unknowingly provided. Beth's voice echoes in his head from earlier, that dry, Midwestern truth-telling tone she's perfected. Kindness without memory becomes permission. He sets the folder down, staring at the name, his name, printed cleanly across the title. Ownership in ink, disregard in action. A quiet anger stirs in his chest, not the kind that burns, but the kind that sharpens. Years of overlooked gratitude, of quiet sacrifices mistaken for obligation, all crystallizing into clarity. He walks to the hallway, glancing toward Kyle's closed door. He can hear faint music playing, some pop song, carefree and oblivious. Edward watches the thin strip of light beneath the door, then turns away. Back in his room, he sits at the desk, runs his hand across the folder once more, then places it neatly in the drawer. The sound of the lock clicking shut is soft, final, like a seal closing over something long overdue. He doesn't sigh this time. He doesn't mutter. He just sits there, staring at the key resting in his palm. Small, metallic, cold. Outside, the winter wind picks up, rattling the bare branches against the window pane. Inside, Edward Grant, the man who once gave without measure, begins to measure everything. And as the lamplight fades, his shadow lengthens across the locked drawer, heavy with the knowledge that love, once mistaken for weakness, has quietly turned into resolve. Friday night hums with the low rhythm of conversation and the clink of glassware. The house glows warm from the outside, music drifting through open windows, laughter spilling out onto the porch. Edward stands in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, washing a small mountain of wine glasses. He can hear the celebration in the next room, but none of it is meant for him. Kyle's voice rises above the noise. "To the next chapter," he announces, and a chorus of cheers follows. His promotion, regional sales manager, has filled the house with faces Edward doesn't know. Well-dressed young professionals crowd around the dining table, trading stories about bonuses, market shares, and vacations to places Edward's generation never thought to visit. Earlier that evening, Kyle had poked his head into the kitchen. "Hey, Dad, we're having a few people over. Promotion thing." Edward had smiled, proud at first. "Congratulations, son. Should I set out extra chairs?" Kyle hesitated, glancing at his watch. "Actually, maybe you can stay in the back tonight. No offense, it's just, a young crowd thing. Boss and coworkers. Might feel weird." He'd said it casually, like asking someone to take off their shoes before entering. Edward had simply nodded. "Sure, I'll keep out of the way." Now, hours later, that phrase, "no offense," keeps echoing in his mind, dull and steady, the way a bruise throbs after the impact. He dries another glass, setting it on the counter. The kitchen is bright but lonely, the hum of the refrigerator the only companion to the laughter spilling from the next room. He doesn't need to lean close to hear what they're saying. Sound travels easily through old walls. Amber's voice rises above the chatter, clear, amused. "Wait, hold on. Your dad still pays your car insurance? That's adorable." The room bursts into laughter. Edward freezes mid-motion, towel in hand. The sting hits harder because it's said without malice, just easy mockery, the kind people use when they don't realize they're dissecting someone's dignity. Kyle's reply cuts through the noise. He needs to feel useful. It keeps him busy. More laughter. A glass clinks. Someone says, "Cheers," and the conversation drifts on. But for Edward, time stops there. The sink water runs cold against his hands, and the air feels heavier, slower. He stares at the row of clean glasses lined up like soldiers, uniform, shining, meaningless. His reflection wavers in the window above the sink. Gray hair, deep lines, the quiet exhaustion of a man who gave more than anyone remembers. He could walk in there. He could call Kyle out, make him face the weight of what he just said. But what would that do? It wouldn't teach. It would only expose. And Edward Grant doesn't yell. Not anymore. Instead, he reaches for a towel, folds it neatly, and lays it on the counter. His movements are deliberate, almost ritualistic, the discipline of a man who has learned to turn pain into order. He places the last glass on the drying rack, the sound crisp, final. Then he steps toward the back door, opens it quietly, and steps outside. The cold air hits him like clarity. The laughter fades behind the closed door, replaced by the distant hum of city lights and the rustle of bare branches. He walks down the back steps slowly, his breath visible in the February night. The yard smells faintly of frost and pine mulch, clean, unpretentious, honest. He stops by the edge of the driveway, hands in his coat pockets, staring at the BMW glinting under the porch light. Its paint reflects the house, all that warmth and motion. But standing out here, he feels none of it. The sound from inside muffles again, another round of laughter breaking loose. The words, "he needs to feel useful," repeat in his mind, quieter now but deeper, like something carved rather than spoken. A gust of wind moves across the yard, lifting a loose napkin from the porch table and sending it tumbling across the grass. Edward watches it drift, weightless and unwanted until it lands at his feet. He bends down, picks it up, and folds it slowly, neatly, before tucking it into his pocket. His movements are calm, but his eyes, those steady blue-gray eyes, have hardened. The porch light flickers once, then steadies again. Inside, a new song begins to play, cheerful and loud. Edward turns away from the glow of the windows and walks into the dark. The camera follows him, his slow, measured stride across the frozen lawn, his silhouette swallowed by the quiet night. What began as humiliation now carries the first weight of intent. The next morning arrives pale and wind-bitten, sunlight struggling through the blinds. Edward sits at the kitchen table with his coffee, the air still heavy from last night's silence. The remnants of Kyle's dinner party remain scattered through the house, half-empty wine glasses, napkins, a faint smell of perfume in the air. Edward doesn't bother cleaning. Some messes aren't his to fix anymore. The mail lies in a small pile by the toaster. He flips through it absent-mindedly. Grocery coupons, a utilities notice, then stops. A crisp envelope from the bank catches his eye. Registration renewal notice. His name sits neatly printed across the front. He tears it open. Inside, a familiar set of numbers, the BMW's make, model, VIN, all listed beneath a line that reads, Registered Owner, Edward L. Grant. He stares at it, expressionless. His thumb traces the embossed header, the proof of ownership that never changed hands, because Kyle never bothered to make it official. The silence in the room grows heavier. Edward stands, retrieves his phone from the counter, and dials the number printed on the letterhead. A woman answers, polite and rehearsed. Minneapolis BMW dealership. This is Tracy. He clears his throat. This is Edward Grant. I need to confirm something. The BMW 3 Series, silver, license ending in 92L. There's the soft tapping of a keyboard on the other end. Yes, Mr. Grant. Fully paid off as of 2 years ago. Congratulations. Edward's jaw tightens. Appreciate it, he says flatly. Can you tell me what it's worth now? Current resale, about $48,000, depending on mileage and condition. He nods to himself, though she can't see it. Good to know. He ends the call. The number lingers in his head. $48,000. A sum that once would have meant something. A nest egg, a college fund, a safety net. Now, it's just the price tag on his son's entitlement. That afternoon, Beth stops by. She's carrying a small box of muffins, always pretending it's an excuse to check in. Edward slides the bank letter across the table. Still mine, he says. Beth squints at it. Your name's still on the title? Never came off. She sits back, crossing her arms. Then that car's yours, plain and simple. He says nothing. Beth studies his face, the quiet tension behind his calm. You know, she says, half smiling, you could sell it out from under him. Edward doesn't laugh. He doesn't even look up. The idea hangs there, light in her voice, heavy in his silence. Beth watches him, her expression softening. I was joking, Ed. He gives the faintest nod. Sure. But his eyes stay fixed on the paper. That night, Kyle comes home late, smelling faintly of cologne and downtown bars. Edward sits in his armchair, reading, but not reading, the TV murmuring in the background. Kyle tosses his coat over the banister, drops his keys onto the counter with the casual authority of someone who's never had to earn what he owns. Heading to Chicago Monday, Kyle says. Work trip. Should be fun. Big clients, corporate dinners. You know how it is. Edward looks up briefly. I used to. Kyle grins, missing the meaning. Right. Different times. He grabs a soda from the fridge, pops it open, and scrolls through his phone. The conversation dies quickly. Kyle's too busy texting. Edward too quiet to continue. Eventually, the younger man disappears down the hall, leaving the faint scent of his cologne behind. Expensive, shallow, forgettable. Edward stays where he is. The ticking of the wall clock sounds louder now, steady and relentless. He glances at the counter where the keys still rest, a small metal bundle of arrogance and dependence. He picks them up, studies the worn fob, then sets them back down exactly as they were. After a long moment, he walks to the small drawer near the fridge, where Kyle keeps loose paperwork and junk mail. Buried under restaurant menus, he finds the insurance card. He unfolds it, scans the text until he reaches the line he was looking for. VIN 4SUD 92092L. He pulls a notepad from his pocket and writes it down carefully. When he's done, he slips the notepad into his jacket. The house around him hums with quiet, the sound of a man thinking too clearly to be angry anymore. Through the window, the BMW gleams under the porch light, frost forming along its hood. Edward watches it for a long time, eyes steady, face unreadable. He turns off the kitchen light and walks down the hall, his reflection briefly crossing the dark glass of the window, a silhouette of calm wrapped around something colder. The VIN number rests in his pocket like a secret. Friday night descends cold and quiet over Minneapolis. Edward sits at the kitchen table, the same one he built decades ago when the house still rang with Maggie's laughter. His phone glows against the dim light, a simple message typed out and sent minutes ago. Need a ride to the doctor tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. He watches the screen, waiting for those 3 blinking dots that mean a reply is coming. Nothing. Outside, the wind rises, brushing dead leaves across the porch. Inside, the refrigerator hums, and the house remains stubbornly silent. He sets the phone face down and finishes his tea. It's an old habit, asking, politely, waiting patiently, one that's beginning to feel less like respect and more like begging for crumbs. By morning, his patience meets its answer. Edward steps into the hallway just as Kyle rushes past, gym bag slung over his shoulder, earbuds already in. Morning, Edward calls. Kyle doesn't slow down. Running late, he says over his shoulder. We'll talk later. The front door shuts. The sound of the car engine follows, a confident roar fading into the distance. Edward stands in the entryway for a long moment, coat half on, watching the empty driveway through the glass. His phone sits silent on the counter, message still marked delivered. A knock breaks the stillness. Beth leans in the doorway, bundled against the cold, a knowing look in her eyes. Guess I'm your chauffeur again. He forces a faint smile. Seems that way. They drive through the gray morning in her old Subaru, the heater rattling. Edward stares out the window, snow beginning to flurry, the city half awake. At an intersection, traffic slows. His gaze catches on a familiar sight. Kyle's BMW parked carelessly in a fire lane, hazard lights blinking, a coffee cup balanced on the roof. Beth sees it too. Guess he's working out priorities before parking laws. Edward doesn't respond. The muscle in his jaw tightens once, then goes still. At the clinic, fluorescent lights hum overhead. Edward sits across from the doctor, a young man, maybe Kyle's age, with a clipboard and too much confidence. Your blood pressure's a little high, the doctor says, making notes. You have family support nearby? Edward gives a thin smile. You could say that. The doctor nods, distracted. Good, good. Helps recovery. Outside, the morning light is brighter, the air brittle. Beth waits near the curb, scarf pulled tight. She studies his face as he approaches, the calm surface that hides a deeper current. Well, she asks, doctors say you'll live? He chuckles softly. Long enough to be inconvenient. They walk toward the car. Snow crunches beneath their boots, the sound steady, deliberate. At the door, Beth pauses. You still sure you won't teach him a lesson? Edward looks out toward the street, the stream of traffic, the blur of life moving past. Lessons only work when graded publicly, he says. Beth frowns, curious. Meaning? He just opens the passenger door and slides in, leaving her question hanging in the cold air. The drive home is quiet. He stares ahead, but his mind isn't on the road. It's turning, slowly, like gears catching after years of rust. Every unpaid favor, every dismissive remark, every empty promise, they've been small weights, accumulating one by one. Now they've reached their limit. When Beth drops him off, he thanks her and walks inside without another word. The house is empty again. Still, quiet, unaware of the shift happening within its walls. Edward hangs his coat, steps into the study, and opens the desk drawer. The folder with the car's title rests inside, waiting. He touches it once, then closes the drawer again. Not yet. Instead, he walks to the kitchen, pulls out his phone, and scrolls through his contacts. His thumb hesitates only briefly before tapping a number labeled Auto Sales, Private Brokers. A man answers, upbeat and businesslike. Morning, this is Dale. What can I do for you? Edward's tone is calm, almost polite. Looking to sell a vehicle, high-end, clean title, need discretion. Sure thing, the broker replies. Make and model? Edward glances out the window at the driveway, where the BMW gleams beneath the pale light. 2021, silver, mint condition. Excellent, the man says. We'll start with an appraisal. When's good for you? Edward's eyes stay fixed on the car outside. Soon, he says. Very soon. When the call ends, he sets the phone on the counter, his reflection faint in the darkened glass of the window. Snow begins to fall. Slow, quiet, inevitable. Inside, Edward Grant sits motionless, expression calm but eyes sharp, a man no longer waiting for respect to arrive on someone else's schedule. Tomorrow will start like any other day, but beneath it, something has already begun. Saturday morning breaks gray and wet, the kind of Minneapolis morning that promises more rain than light. Edward sits by the kitchen window, coffee cooling beside him, his phone face down on the table. The air is still, waiting. When the vibration finally comes, it startles him more than it should. He answers on the first ring. "Mr. Grant," the voice says, brisk, professional, the same broker he spoke with 2 days ago. "Good news. We've got a confirmed buyer for the BMW, private party paying in cash. If you're ready, pickup can happen within 48 hours. Edward says nothing at first, just watches a droplet of rain trace its way down the window pane. 48 hours, he repeats. "Yes, sir. Monday morning at your address work. We'll handle everything. Transfer, paperwork, inspection, clean sale." He nods, though the broker can't see it. "Monday morning works." "Perfect. I'll send the agreement over for your signature this afternoon." When the call ends, Edward sets the phone down gently, the words echoing in the quiet room. Confirmed buyer, cash sale, Monday morning. He leans back, staring at the BMW through the window, silver body slick with rain, tires glistening black against the curb. It sits there like a monument to everything Kyle takes for granted. The car isn't just a vehicle anymore. It's a mirror of his son's arrogance, polished and untouchable, until someone decides to reclaim the reflection. That afternoon, Beth stops by briefly to drop off a pie. She chats about the weather, about her nephew's wedding, about anything except the question that hangs between them, what Edward plans to do next. She can see it in his eyes, the stillness that precedes motion. When she leaves, he opens his email. The broker's message waits at the top of his inbox. Attached, the sale agreement, neat and formal. He prints it, signs his name where required, then folds it carefully into an envelope. His handwriting, slow, precise, fills the line labeled Seller, Edward L. Grant. The act feels both foreign and inevitable. By evening, the house fills with noise again. Kyle's home early, upbeat, pacing the living room while talking loudly on speakerphone. Edward listens from the kitchen as his son boasts to someone from work, a smooth, performative rhythm in every sentence. "Yeah, I'm flying out Sunday night," Kyle says. "Chicago for the week, meeting the new clients in person. Corporate wants a face they can trust." He ends the call, grabs a beer, and wanders into the kitchen. "Hey, Dad, mind watching the house while I'm gone?" he asks casually. Edward looks up. "Of course." "Appreciate it," Kyle says, already half distracted by his phone again. "Shouldn't be any trouble. Just make sure the mail doesn't pile up." Edward nods. "I'll handle it." "Cool," Kyle says, turning toward the hallway. "You know, I was thinking earlier, that car's probably the only thing in my life that runs perfect. Not a squeak, not a scratch." He laughs, pride dripping from every word. "Guess I've got good luck somewhere." Edward studies him, the boy who once stood in the driveway learning to ride a bike, who used to run to him with skinned knees and trust that everything could be fixed. Now that boy speaks like a man who's forgotten what being fixed ever meant. Kyle doesn't notice the silence that follows. He just finishes his beer, tosses the empty bottle into the recycling, and disappears down the hall. Edward waits until the bedroom door shuts before reaching for the envelope on the counter. He slides the signed sale agreement inside his coat pocket, the paper stiff against the fabric. The weight of it feels precise, measured, not guilt, not excitement, just certainty. He walks to the porch, opens the door, and steps into the cool evening. The air smells faintly of rain and pine. Across the driveway, the BMW catches the light from the street lamp, sleek and gleaming like a secret waiting to be told. He stands there for a long time, coat collar up against the wind, the faint hum of the city in the distance. Behind him, laughter flickers from the television, a canned sitcom laugh track echoing faintly through the house. Edward doesn't turn back. His face, caught in the porch light, is calm but unreadable. Years of patience crystallized into purpose. The sound of rain intensifies, tapping steadily on the roof, steady as breath. Inside his coat, the paper rustles, a promise folded between the lines. The betrayal arc closes not with shouting, not with confrontation, but with the still silence of a man who has finally decided that respect won't be asked for anymore. And in that silence, under the hum of the porch light, something sharp and unstoppable begins to form. The storm is coming. Monday morning breaks clear and cold, the kind of brightness that only comes after a night of rain. The sound of a diesel engine idles outside Edward's house, steady and low. A white transport truck, clean and impersonal, waits at the edge of the driveway. Its trailer gate gleams in the early sunlight. Edward steps out wearing his heavy coat, paperwork folder tucked neatly under one arm. His movements are slow, deliberate, the calm rhythm of a man who's already decided there's nothing left to debate. The driver, a younger man in a company jacket, greets him with a quick nod. "Mr. Grant?" "That's me." "Got the paperwork right here," the driver says, flipping open his clipboard. "Once you sign, we'll handle the rest. Buyer wired funds this morning. You should see the deposit soon as it clears." Edward signs the bill of sale with the same precision he used to sign business contracts decades ago, one careful stroke at a time. His penmanship is steady, unshaken. When he's done, the driver tears off a carbon copy and hands it to him. "Appreciate your promptness, sir." Edward simply nods. "Take care loading it." The driver gestures toward the driveway. Two men roll out the steel ramp, guiding the BMW up into the carrier. The engine purrs as it climbs, tires whispering against the metal. The sound, that low mechanical hum, feels like a heartbeat being carried away. Edward stands at the edge of the porch, hands in his pockets, watching the scene unfold. No flicker of hesitation crosses his face. The car, polished, perfect, symbolic, now sits caged in the truck's belly, straps tightening across its frame. The driver shuts the ramp, locks it, and gives a small wave. "All set. Should be at the new owners by sundown." Edward gives a polite nod. "Drive safe." When the truck pulls away, the rumble fades into distance, leaving behind only quiet, the kind that feels like space being reclaimed. He steps back inside, sits at the kitchen table, and opens his laptop. A notification blinks on the screen. Incoming wire deposit. 47,980 $. The numbers glow clean and certain. He transfers the amount into his main account, then splits half into another, a dormant business account with his name still on it. The movement is smooth, methodical, almost serene. The sound of the doorbell breaks the stillness. Beth steps in, holding a thermos of coffee and an expression that says she already knows. "Heard a truck earlier," she says softly. "Guess that wasn't a delivery." Edward closes the laptop. "No, pick up." Beth sets the thermos down, watching him closely. "Feeling guilty yet?" He looks up, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. "No," he says. "Just finished paying for my silence." She studies him for a moment, then nods. "Then I hope it's worth it." "It is," he says simply. "Finally is." They sit for a while, not speaking. Outside, the sound of the wind rattles the porch chimes. For the first time in months, the house feels balanced, like its walls recognize him again. Later that morning, as he's tidying the counter, his phone buzzes. A text from Kyle, mid-flight. "Did you fill the tank before I left?" Edward stares at the message for a long moment, then types back slowly. It's empty now. He hits send. The read receipt never appears. Somewhere above the clouds, the plane's Wi-Fi drops, and Kyle's phone screen freezes mid-refresh. Edward sets the phone face down. The silence that follows isn't satisfaction. It's something quieter, deeper, like the first still breath after a long storm. He walks to the window. The driveway is bare, except for faint tire marks curving into the street, dark impressions in the damp concrete. The morning wind stirs them, scattering small traces of gravel and dust. He steps outside, the cold biting through his coat. The space where the BMW once sat looks larger now, emptier, but somehow lighter. He stands there for a long time, hands in his pockets, the horizon pale with winter sun. The camera lingers on his face, unreadable, calm, resolved. A gust of wind blows across the drive, lifting the last faint print of the tires until the concrete is clean again. Behind him, the chime rings once, a hollow final note, as Edward Grant turns back toward the house he's begun to reclaim. The sale is done. The silence has been bought and paid for, but the story isn't over. Not yet. The wheels hit the tarmac with a dull thud. Kyle's eyes flick open as the cabin lights brighten. He rubs his temples, half hungover from late-night whiskey with clients. The flight attendant's voice drones in the background, reminding passengers to remain seated. He's already pulling out his phone before the plane even reaches the gate. He scrolls to his father's number, presses call, and waits. The line rings, once, twice, 4 times, then cuts to voicemail. He exhales sharply. "Dad, hey, just landed. Can you pick me up?" His tone is brisk, the way one might order a favor rather than request it. By the time he collects his bag, there's still no response, no text, no callback. Annoyance rises like heat behind his eyes. He books an Uber, muttering to himself about unreliable old men and the importance of communication, the kind of irony only arrogance can carry. The car ride home is silent, except for the muffled radio. Snow flurries drift past the windows, pale against the gray sky. When the Uber turns into his street, Kyle leans forward. His house comes into view. Familiar, comfortable, always waiting. Except this time, something's off. The driveway is empty. He frowns, tapping the driver's shoulder. "That's weird," he mutters. "Car's supposed to be there." The driver says nothing. Kyle pays, steps out into the cold, and stares at the vacant space where the BMW should be. It feels wrong, exposed, like an empty stage after the curtain's fallen. Amber opens the front door before he can reach for his keys. "Hey," she says, smiling faintly. "How was Chicago?" He doesn't answer. "Where's the car?" She blinks. "What?" "The BMW. It's gone." Amber looks past him, confused. Maybe he took it for service or something. You know how your dad is. He likes to keep things running smooth. Kyle's frown deepens. He doesn't even drive that thing. He pushes past her, dropping his bag in the hallway. The house smells faintly of lemon cleaner and coffee, too quiet for comfort. The kitchen counter is spotless, almost staged, and there, in the center of the table, lies a single white envelope with his name written across the front. The handwriting is familiar, steady, careful. Kyle tears it open. Inside, crisp documents, official, unmistakable. Title, Transfer Notice. He flips through the papers, eyes darting across signatures, not understanding at first. Then it hits him. Seller, Edward L. Grant. Buyer, private transaction. The world tilts slightly. His chest tightens. "No," he whispers. "No, no, no." Amber steps closer. "What is it?" He slams the papers onto the counter. "He sold my car." "Your car," she says carefully. Kyle freezes, realizing the slip. His hands curl into fists. "The car," he corrects, voice brittle. "He sold the damn car." Amber opens her mouth to speak, but stops when she sees his face. Pale, jaw clenched, the kind of expression that comes when pride meets consequence. He storms down the hallway, footsteps heavy, past the framed photos that now feel staged, foreign. His father's door is half open. He pushes it wider. The room is immaculate. The bed is made tight as a hotel sheet. The closet stands half empty. The old leather suitcase, the one his father took to visit his army friend, is gone. For the first time, Kyle feels something foreign crawl up his spine. Unease. He turns slowly, scanning the room. On the nightstand sits a small, framed note, propped beside a photo of his mother. The handwriting is the same as the envelope. He picks it up. Just one line. "You left me waiting once. I returned the favor." The words land like a punch he didn't see coming. The silence that follows is deafening. Amber stands in the doorway, unsure whether to speak. Kyle doesn't look up. His reflection in the mirror behind him shows a man stripped of certainty, a man realizing too late that arrogance has a price tag. He sets the frame down carefully, but his hands tremble. Outside, wind whistles against the windows, low and cold. He looks towards the empty driveway visible through the curtain gap, just faint tire marks, half erased by fresh snow. And for the first time in a long time, Kyle Grant doesn't feel in control of anything at all. The camera lingers on the note's reflection in the window glass as the music fades, soft, deliberate, the echo of justice returning home. The following week, the hum of office life feels different, sharper, colder. Kyle walks through the glass doors of the downtown firm, head high, suit crisp. But something in his stride has changed. The rhythm that once carried confidence now feels uneven. He senses eyes on him. Conversations pause when he enters the break room. A few forced smiles, half-hearted nods. The whispers start as soon as he passes. Heard his dad sold his car out from under him. Whole thing's on him. Guy's been bragging for years. The gossip moves fast. Faster than truth. Faster than pride can catch up. By the time he reaches his desk, the noise has already wrapped around him like static. He sits, pretending not to hear, but his reflection in the dark monitor gives him away, jaw tight, eyes unfocused. The morning meeting begins in the conference room, a sleek space with glass walls that expose everyone's reactions. His boss, Dan, runs the show, mid-50s, polished, the kind of man who senses weakness like a change in air pressure. "Kyle," Dan says halfway through the presentation, his tone clipped. "You want to weigh in on the client pitch?" Kyle looks up, blinking. He hasn't heard a word of it. Yes, I think we..." Dan cuts him off with a single look. The silence around the table is thick. Someone coughs. When the meeting ends, Dan lingers behind. "My office," he says simply. Inside, the blinds are half drawn, slats cutting the sunlight into stripes across the floor. Kyle sits opposite his boss, trying to steady his breathing. Dan doesn't bother with pleasantries. "You've been off your game for a week," he says. "Missed details, distracted in meetings, late responses." "Just personal stuff," Kyle mutters. Dan leans forward, voice low but sharp. "Then sort your personal stuff, because perception kills deals faster than mistakes. Clients can smell chaos." Kyle swallows hard, nodding. "Understood." Dan studies him for a long moment. "You're a good salesman, but you're not untouchable. Don't make me prove that." The words hang there, heavy and final. When Kyle leaves the office, he feels smaller. Outside, his reflection catches in the tinted glass. Suit immaculate, but the man inside looks unraveled. He presses the key fob to unlock his car, but the sound that greets him isn't the smooth chirp of his BMW. It's the hollow click of a rental sedan. The car smells of plastic and somebody else's cologne. He slides behind the wheel, slamming the door harder than necessary. His phone buzzes with a text, a friend forwarding a meme someone made at work. It's a picture of a BMW with the caption, "When Dad's the repo man." His thumb hovers over the block button, but he doesn't press it. He tosses the phone onto the passenger seat and stares out the windshield, jaw clenched. That night, at home, the silence presses harder. Amber's sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, eyes distant. He drops his briefcase onto the counter. "You hear what people are saying about me?" Amber looks up slowly. "Kyle, they're saying it because you told everyone that car was yours." "It was mine." She shakes her head. "No, it wasn't. And deep down, you know that. You pushed him too far." Kyle's laugh comes out hollow. He's bluffing. He just wants attention. Amber sets her phone down, voice steady. "You really think selling your car, disappearing for days, that's a bluff?" Kyle looks away, staring out the window where the streetlights blur through the fog. "He's just trying to make a point." Amber's tone softens. "Maybe the point is that you stopped listening." For a long time, neither of them speaks. The clock ticks. Somewhere outside, a car passes. Not a BMW, just another commuter's engine fading into distance. Kyle finally checks his phone, scrolling to his father's number. He presses call. The line rings once, twice, then cuts to a recorded voice. "The number you've dialed is unavailable." He tries again. Same result. Blocked. He sets the phone down on the counter, the realization creeping in, slow and bitter. The first time his father has ever shut a door he couldn't force open. Amber watches him quietly, her eyes tired. "What now?" she asks. Kyle doesn't answer. His reflection in the window looks nothing like the man who once bragged about control. The silence stretches until even the hum of the refrigerator feels loud. Finally, he mutters, almost to himself, "He's bluffing." But his voice trembles on the word bluff, and the echo doesn't sound convinced. The screen fades on his face, proud, cornered, and for the first time, uncertain which one of them actually won. The morning light inside the bank is soft and sterile. Polished floors, muffled footsteps, the quiet hum of transactions. Edward stands at the counter with his coat neatly buttoned, the envelope in his hand thick with finality. Across from him, the young teller greets him with a practiced smile, one that doesn't know how much weight sits behind the paper he carries. He slides the cashier's check across the counter. "Deposit, please," he says. The teller glances down at the amount and blinks. "That's quite a sale, Mr. Grant," she says politely. "Planning a big purchase?" Edward meets her eyes, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at his mouth. "Maybe," he says, "something that lasts longer this time." She nods, entering numbers into her screen. The printer hums, spitting out the receipt with the precision of a machine that doesn't care about symbolism. Edward thanks her, takes the slip, and steps aside to the small writing counter near the window. Beth sits waiting in one of the lobby chairs, tapping her fingers against a styrofoam cup of coffee. "Done?" she asks. He nods. "Half of it's in checking, the rest." He pulls a second form from his coat pocket, slides it across the counter to another clerk. The paper bears a faint watermark. "Grant, Hauling LLC." The clerk looks at it. "This account's been inactive for quite a while, Mr. Grant." "I'm aware," Edward says, "reactivating it." The clerk nods, typing briskly. "Transfer amount?" 24,000. The numbers blink on the screen. Edward watches them shift from one account to another, quiet money moving with the weight of purpose. When the transfer is done, he signs again, his handwriting steady as a blueprint line. The clerk hands him the updated slip. "All set, Mr. Grant. It's good to see you getting back into business." Edward folds the receipt and slides it into his wallet. "Feels like time," he says, half to himself. Outside, the wind bites sharp against his face as he and Beth cross the parking lot. The sky is gray but clear, the kind of winter day that carries both chill and promise. Beth eyes him as they reach her car. "You're awfully calm for a man who just cashed out 48 grand. "I learned calm costs less," he says dryly. She grins. "So what now? You buying another car? Taking a trip?" Edward opens the passenger door, pauses. "Neither." She tilts her head. "Then what?" He glances toward the horizon, low industrial roofs, faint smokestacks in the distance. Something that's been gathering dust too long. That night, the house is quiet. The television flickers without sound, a muted companion. Edward sits at his old desk, the one that once bore bills and bank ledgers. Now it's spread with rolled blueprints, old, yellowed, but still legible. Grant Hauling Company. The name stretches across the top in bold ink, drawn decades ago when he first built the business from nothing but a pickup and a promise. He traces a finger along one of the faded lines, the routes they used to run, the warehouses he once owned. There's a rhythm to the work, structure, order, purpose, the things Kyle never understood. Beth's voice comes from the doorway. She's holding 2 mugs of coffee, her expression somewhere between curiosity and pride. "You're starting something," she says softly. Edward doesn't look up right away. He's measuring something on the page with a pencil, tapping twice, calculating quietly. "Not starting," he says. "Just finishing what I began 30 years ago." Beth steps closer, sets one mug beside him. "And what does that mean?" He leans back, eyes on the blueprints. "It means I stopped waiting for him to carry the name. I'll do it myself." For a moment, neither of them speaks. The sound of the clock fills the silence, steady, like the heartbeat of a plan. Beth studies him, her expression soft but thoughtful. "He's going to notice," she says. Edward's eyes lift from the paper, calm and certain. "I'm counting on it." He folds the blueprint with deliberate care, slipping it back into its tube. The desk lamp flickers, casting his shadow across the walls, large, unbending, like the man he used to be. Outside, the wind rattles the gutters, carrying with it the low hum of something returning, not vengeance, but motion. Edward exhales slowly, the corners of his mouth tightening in quiet resolve. The bank receipt lies folded beside him, the ink still fresh. The comeback has already begun. The wind whips through the narrow suburban streets as Kyle steers the rental sedan, jaw-locked, eyes scanning every mailbox for a name that matches the one that's been haunting him for days, Beth Collins. He's been replaying the same thought since the morning. His father didn't just disappear, he's hiding. And Beth, the quiet neighbor who always hovered on the edges of their lives, likely knows where. He spots her house at the end of the block. White shutters, porch swing, the same old maple tree bending over the front walk. He pulls up too fast, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The car's engine sputters as he slams it into park. Inside, Beth hears the tires and knows before she even looks. Some instincts come from years of watching tempers walk up her driveway. She wipes her hands on a dish towel and goes to the door. The knock isn't polite. It's the knock of a man who's already angry and looking for a place to put it. She opens it halfway. "Kyle," she says, voice steady but cool. "I wondered how long it would take." His eyes dart past her shoulder, scanning the hallway, the furniture, the faint glow of lamplight from the den. "Is he here?" he demands. Beth crosses her arms, blocking the view. "He's not here." Kyle lets out a short, humorless laugh. "Right, because you two have never covered for each other before." Beth's face doesn't move. "He's not here, Kyle. And if you came looking for a scene, pick another street. I like mine quiet." Her calmness only feeds his frustration. "Tell him," Kyle says, voice rising. "He owes me a car." Beth's eyebrows lift slightly. "He doesn't owe you anything." "You think this is funny?" "No," she says evenly. "I think it's tragic. A grown man confusing generosity for debt." Kyle takes a half step forward. "He took what's mine." Beth's voice sharpens, firm but unshaken. "No, Kyle. He took back what you borrowed, what he gave you when you didn't have a thing to stand on, and you repaid him with arrogance." Her words hang in the air like frost. Across the street, curtains shift, neighbors watching through slivers of blinds, the kind of scene that draws quiet whispers later, when the lights go out. Kyle notices them and straightens, cheeks flushed. "This isn't over," he says, his tone more wounded than threatening. Beth leans on the doorframe, unflinching. "You're right. It's not over until you understand the difference between pride and gratitude." He shakes his head, the fury giving way to something smaller, disbelief, humiliation. "You sound just like him." "I'll take that as a compliment," she says softly. He turns on his heel, strides back toward the rental car, and slams the door so hard it rattles the frame. The tires spin on the loose gravel, kicking dust into the air as he speeds away. Beth watches him disappear down the street, her hand tightening on the edge of the door. She takes a slow breath, closes it gently, and locks it behind her. The house falls quiet again, save for the ticking of the mantel clock and the low creak of the floorboards settling. She turns toward the den. "You can come out now," she says. From the shadows beyond the half-drawn curtain, Edward steps forward, his outline emerging slowly. He's been standing there the whole time, silent, unseen. His face is unreadable, not triumphant, not even angry, just still. Beth studies him. "You knew he'd come." Edward nods once. "He's predictable. Then why hide?" He glances toward the window where the rental's tire marks still scar the gravel. "Because some lessons, Beth, need to echo before they're heard." She tilts her head. "You think he'll hear it?" Edward looks past her, through the thin curtain, his gaze distant. "Not yet. He still hasn't learned to look before turning corners." Beth frowns. "Meaning?" He offers a small, weary half-smile. "He'll understand soon enough." The clock ticks again, 1, 2, 3, a slow rhythm filling the silence that follows. Outside, the last swirl of dust from Kyle's departure settles over the street, vanishing into the chill air. Inside, Edward returns to the shadows of the den. the faint rustle of papers on the desk marking his movement. The blueprints, the ledger, the new company name, all waiting. Beth stands by the doorway, watching him go, knowing something larger has already been set in motion. The camera lingers on the window. Faint tire marks outside, faint light inside. Two worlds heading for collision. The sun rises pale over the edges of Minneapolis, spilling light onto Edward's quiet property. Frost still clings to the grass, brittle underfoot as he walks the narrow path to the barn behind the house. It's been years since he's opened those doors, long enough for the wood to dry and crack, long enough for the past to turn to dust inside. He grips the old iron latch, the metal biting cold against his palm, and pulls. The hinges groan in protest, the sound echoing into the dim space beyond. A smell of oil, rust, and age spills out, familiar, grounding. The barn is cluttered with remnants of another life, stacked lumber, old tools, crates labeled Grant Hauling Co., all gathering years of quiet decay. And there, half buried under a tarp, sits the shape he came for. Edward grabs the corner of the tarp and yanks it free. Dust explodes into the air like memory. Beneath it rests a rust-colored pickup truck, his first work truck, the one that carried him through the earliest years of his business. The paint has dulled to a faded maroon, the chrome tarnished, but the bones are solid. It's the kind of machine that doesn't give up, only waits to be remembered. He runs a hand over the hood, leaving a streak through the dust. "You've been patient," he murmurs. Climbing in, the seat groans under his weight. He presses the clutch, turns the key. The engine coughs once, twice, then rumbles to life, uneven but proud. It sounds rough, like him, scarred by years, but still running on something stronger than luck. A small smile finds his lips, the first honest one in weeks. He sits there for a moment, letting the sound fill the barn. Then, shifting into gear, he eases the truck forward. The wheels protest at first, grinding against years of stillness, then roll free into daylight. The drive into town is slow, deliberate. Wind rushes through the open window, the cold air biting his cheeks. The radio doesn't work anymore, but the hum of the engine is enough of a soundtrack. He passes the familiar streets he once drove daily, back when work meant purpose and not just habit. When he pulls into the small auto shop on the edge of town, a bell jingles above the office door. The place smells of grease and exhaust, a comforting scent, honest and unpretentious. A man in coveralls steps out from under a lift. He's younger, maybe in his 30s, with oil-stained hands and an easy grin. "Morning, what can I do for you?" Edward pats the hood of the pickup. "Full tune-up. She's been sitting a while. Let's make her run." The mechanic whistles softly, running a hand along the fender. "84 Ford, right? Haven't seen one of these in years." He glances up. "Hey, wait a second. Aren't you the guy who sold that Beamer yesterday? I heard someone talking about it at the dealership." Edward's mouth quirks, the faintest glint of humor behind his calm eyes. "Traded flash for function," he says. The mechanic chuckles. "Well, you traded right. These old trucks will outlive us both if you treat them decent." Edward nods. "That's the idea." He hands over the keys. "Take your time. I'm in no rush." Outside, he walks a few blocks to the small cafe across the street, orders black coffee, sits by the window. He watches the mechanic pop the hood, lean in, start working, movement steady, efficient. For the first time in a long time, Edward feels a strange kind of peace, not triumph, not gloating, just something simple, something earned. By late afternoon, the truck hums again, clean, alive, steady. The mechanic waves as Edward climbs back behind the wheel. "She's good to go, Mr. Grant. Runs like new." Edward smiles, tipping an invisible hat. "Appreciate it." He drives home slowly, letting the old pickup take its time. The engine's growl is deep and familiar, the steering rough in his hands. The city unfolds in front of him, the skyline fading into fields. The horizon burns gold as the sun begins to set. For a moment, he hums, low, tuneless, peaceful. The camera lingers on the reflection of that sunset across the pickup's windshield, warm light catching in the scratches on the glass. The truck keeps rolling toward the horizon, leaving behind the sterile shine of his son's world for something quieter, older, and far more real. In that golden light, Edward Grant looks almost like he's coming home again. And somewhere in the distance, the faint rumble of the rebuilt engine carries the sound of a man starting over, not with fury, but with purpose. The afternoon is quiet on Beth Collins Street, too quiet for a weekday, the kind of stillness that makes every sound matter. Beth is in her kitchen, folding dish towels when the doorbell rings. Through the frosted glass, she sees a figure standing nervously on the porch, hands tucked into her coat pockets. Amber. Beth wipes her hands and opens the door, her expression cautious, but not unkind. "Afternoon, dear." Amber's eyes are red around the edges, as if she's been holding back a storm. "Hi, Mrs. Collins. I'm sorry to just show up. I didn't know who else to talk to." Beth steps aside. "Then you came to the right place. Coffee?" They sit at the small kitchen table, the one that's seen more truth than gossip over the years. Steam curls from their mugs, faint and comforting. Amber doesn't touch hers. Finally, she says it, the sentence that's been trapped behind her teeth. "Kyle lied about the car." Beth raises an eyebrow, but doesn't interrupt. Amber swallows. "He told me his dad gave it to him. Said it was a gift after his accident. Said he paid him back years ago." Beth lets out a slow breath, her expression unreadable. "Now you know the truth he avoided." Amber stares into her coffee. "I feel stupid. I believed him. Every time he bragged about that car, I thought it was pride. Now I see it was ownership, like he had something to prove." Beth leans back, voice soft but firm. "Kyle's always needed to prove he's not his father. Trouble is, he keeps measuring himself against a man who never needed proving." Amber's eyes flicker toward the window, where the trees sway in the cold wind. "He's changed since that promotion," she says quietly. "He used to be kind, grounded. Now it's like he wears that job like armor, entitled, dismissive." Beth nods slowly. Power doesn't change a man. It just unmasks him. Amber looks up then, really looks at her. "You think he'll ever see what he's done?" Beth gives a small, tired smile. "Only when it costs him more than pride." Before Amber can reply, a faint sound comes from the adjoining room, the soft creak of a floorboard. She glances toward the den doorway. Beth doesn't flinch. Edward steps into view. He's been there the whole time, half in shadow, listening. The look on his face isn't vengeful, it's weary, but grateful, like a man hearing confirmation of something he already knew. Amber stands quickly, embarrassed. "Mr. Grant, I didn't mean to intrude, I just—" Edward raises a hand gently. "You didn't. You told the truth." She hesitates, unsure what to say. He steps closer, his tone quiet, almost paternal. "Amber," he says, "some men confuse apology with surrender. Don't be one of the people who lets them." She frowns slightly, trying to follow. "Leave," he says softly, "before you start apologizing for him." Amber looks down, her throat tightening. She nods, once, the words landing heavier than she expected. Beth walks her to the door, the silence between them carrying more understanding than comfort. On the porch, the wind tugs at Amber's coat. "Thank you," she says finally. Beth just nods. "Be good to yourself." Amber glances toward the street, then back at the house, the quiet den beyond the window, the man standing still behind the curtain. There's something about Edward's stillness that feels resolute, like he's already somewhere far beyond anger. She steps off the porch, her boots crunching against the gravel, and walks away slowly, shoulders squared against the cold. Beth closes the door, leaning against it for a moment, listening to the silence settle back in. In the den, Edward returns to the desk where his old blueprints lie spread open. His hand rests on them, not to measure, just to feel something solid beneath it. Through the window, the light shifts as Amber's figure fades down the street. She doesn't look back. Inside, Edward's voice breaks the silence, low but certain. "Some lessons," he murmurs, "don't need to be taught twice." The camera lingers on him, one man surrounded by plans for rebuilding, as the light dims to amber, matching the name of the woman who finally saw truth for what it was. The Monday sun breaks through the glass facade of the downtown office, catching on the polished surfaces of monitors and coffee mugs. Another routine morning, another stack of reports waiting for Kyle. He strides in with the false energy of someone trying to convince himself he's fine. But beneath the confident walk, a restless irritation hums. That same ache he's carried since the car, since the silence, since his father stopped answering his calls. He drops his briefcase by the desk, powers up his computer, and reaches for the local paper someone left on the counter. A leftover habit from the older staff. He flips it open absent-mindedly while sipping his coffee, scanning the business section. Then his eyes freeze. There it is. Bold headline centered across the fold. Retired owner revives Grant Halling. Local father brings back a classic. For a moment, he doesn't breathe. Below the headline is a picture, black and white, sharp contrast. His father stands in front of an old warehouse with a fresh painted sign above the door. Grant Halling LLC, the company's original logo, the one Kyle had mocked years. Ego for being outdated, now restored and proudly displayed, only with one subtle change. Underneath the name, in clean modern lettering, reads, Established 1989, Rebuilt 2024. A poetic reclamation. Across the office, one of his co-workers, Neil, notices the paper in his hands. "Hey, that's your dad, right?" he says with a smirk. "Didn't know he was getting back into the game." Kyle forces a tight smile. "Looks like it." Another voice chimes in from the next cubicle. "Family competition. Guess it runs in the blood, huh?" Laughter ripples through the room. Light, casual, completely unaware that each word cuts deeper than the last. Kyle's fingers tighten around the newspaper, crumpling the edge slightly. He scrolls through his phone, searching online. The articles everywhere. Local business sites, social pages, even LinkedIn posts. Retired small business owner Edward Grant reopens the family's original hauling company, promising ethical service and community values. The comments section reads like a love letter to nostalgia. Old school work ethic, love it. Grant Hauling's back. My dad used to use them. Finally, a man who does it for pride, not profit. Every line feels like a public rebuke aimed squarely at him. He slams the paper down just as his boss, Dan, steps out of his office. "Kyle, you seeing this?" he says, holding up his own copy of the morning edition. "Your dad's back in business." Kyle straightens. "Yeah, I saw it." Dan walks over, tone measured but edged. "Interesting move, setting up shop again right in our market. You worried?" "He's trying to ruin me," Kyle says, voice low. Dan raises an eyebrow. "Or maybe he's just working." Kyle scoffs. "Come on, he picked my region, my client base, my name. That's not coincidence." Dan's expression doesn't soften. "Maybe it's not about you." He pauses, then adds pointedly, "Maybe you should try that, working without making it about you." The words hang heavy between them. A few co-workers pretend not to listen, but the shift in energy is obvious. Dan turns and walks back toward his office, leaving Kyle standing there, heat rising to his face. He sinks into his chair, staring at the headline again. The photo burns into his mind. His father standing tall, proud, unbothered by reputation or revenge. Just steady, confident. And then the realization hits. This isn't a stunt. It's not about humiliation. It's about identity. Edward Grant didn't start a new war. He reclaimed the battlefield. Kyle looks out the window, watching the city bustle below, everyone moving with purpose but him. The paper lies open on his desk, the bold headline catching the morning light. At another office across town, Edward sits in his small warehouse, coffee mug in hand, reading the same story. But where Kyle sees defiance, Edward sees only quiet satisfaction. The public tide shifts quietly, but completely. Admiration for the elder Grant spreads across the community like a long overdue correction. And in that reversal, father and son stand on opposite sides of something larger than either of them: pride, legacy, and the reckoning that always follows neglect. The camera lingers on the newspaper's front page as the hum of office chatter fades, replaced by the sound of a slow, rising heartbeat. the unmistakable tempo of a rivalry no longer private. Late morning sunlight cuts across the glass front of the downtown credit union, catching Kyle Grant's reflection as he pushes through the revolving doors. He's dressed sharp as always, tailored suit, polished shoes, but the confidence that used to fill those clothes has thinned. The last few weeks have been a slow unraveling. Whispers at work, his father's face in the papers, the quiet sting of public comparison. Today, though, he plans to fix at least one thing. He straightens his tie, approaches the reception desk, and says with that old salesman smile, "Kyle Grant, appointment with Ms. Reiner, 10 o'clock. The teller nods politely and gestures toward the offices in back. "Go right ahead, Mr. Grant. She's expecting you." Inside, the bank manager, a precise woman in her 50s, greets him with professional warmth. "Morning, Kyle. Please, have a seat." He sits, trying to sound casual. "I wanted to discuss refinancing my personal loan. Just need to restructure the payments a bit. Cash flow timing, that kind of thing." Ms. Reiner pulls up his file, the soft hum of her computer filling the silence. Her brows knit slightly. "All right, I'm seeing your history here." She clicks once more, and something changes in her expression, a flicker of caution. "What?" Kyle asks, sensing it. She turns the monitor slightly, tapping the screen. "It says your co-signer withdrew from the agreement last month." Kyle blinks, confused. "My what?" "Your co-signer." She slides a document across the desk, neat, official, printed in black and blue. His eyes trace the signature line. Edward L. Grant. Kyle feels the air shift, like the room just shrank around him. That's not possible. He can't just do that." "Actually," Ms. Reiner says gently, "since the loans were personal and the credit lines were guaranteed under his collateral, he had every right to revoke as long as the accounts were current." Which, she glances at the screen again, they were. Kyle leans forward, his voice tightening. "So what does that mean for me?" Her tone stays even. "Without a guarantor, your interest rates triple. Risk classification changes when collateral is removed." "Triple?" he echoes, disbelieving. "That's robbery." "Policy," she corrects. Kyle forces a laugh that doesn't sound like one. "I've been with this bank for 10 years. And we appreciate your business," she says, still calm, "but numbers are numbers." He drags a hand through his hair, frustration rising. "Come on, I can't operate under those rates. There's got to be an exception, a temporary—" Ms. Reiner shakes her head, almost apologetically. "The only exception would be reinstating a cosigner." She lets the silence settle before adding, "You could talk to your father." That lands harder than she probably intends. Kyle exhales, a bitter sound. "Right. I'll get right on that." He gathers his papers with jerky motions, the edges crumpling in his grip. The banker starts to say something soft, managerial, useless, but he's already on his feet. "Thank you for your time," he says stiffly, and walks out before she can answer. Outside, the sunlight feels harsher now. He squints against it, walking fast, ignoring the looks from other customers. His reflection catches in the glass as he passes. His father's name, still burning behind his eyes, Edward L. Grant. The signature is burned into him like a verdict. When he reaches the rental car, he slams the door shut and sits in silence. His hands rest on the steering wheel, but his eyes are somewhere else, back in the moment his father first taught him to balance a checkbook, back when respect wasn't something you had to chase. He exhales through his teeth, anger barely contained. "You just had to make it public," he mutters. The engine roars to life, but even that sound feels hollow. All power, no purpose. He drives without aim, the city rushing by in a blur of color and glass. Across town, in a smaller house that smells faintly of coffee and sawdust, Edward Grant sits at his own kitchen table. The morning paper lies folded beside him, the financial section open but unread. In front of him rests a closed checkbook, pen laid neatly across the top. He clicks the pen once, thoughtfully, then places it aside. "Debts," he murmurs, more to himself than anyone, "settle best in daylight." Outside, sunlight pours through the window, glinting off the rim of his coffee mug. The faint rumble of a distant engine passes by, maybe Kyle's, maybe not, But Edward doesn't look up. He simply closes the checkbook, slow and deliberate, the sound of the cover snapping shut like the punctuation on an unspoken sentence. The quiet that follows isn't peaceful. It's the silence that comes when all balances have finally been called due. The gravel crackles under Kyle's tires as the rental car pulls up to the edge of the industrial lot. He kills the engine and sits for a moment, staring at the warehouse ahead. Wide, steel-framed, painted fresh with the words Grant Hauling LLC stenciled across its face. His father's name, his family's name, only now it belongs to one man again. Inside, through the open loading bay, he can see movement, forklifts humming, men in work gloves stacking crates, laughter cutting through the clatter. And in the middle of it all stands Edward. No suit, no pretense. Just a man in a worn flannel shirt and work boots, clipboard in hand, steady and certain. He moves among the workers like someone who's earned their respect, not demanded it. They listen when he speaks, nodding, focused, almost reverent. The sight hits Kyle like a blow. He steps out of the car, slams the door, and walks across the gravel. His polished shoes sink slightly in the dust. Heads turn as he approaches, the steady rhythm of work slowing. By the time he reaches the loading bay, the warehouse has gone nearly silent. Edward looks up, expression calm but unreadable. Kyle. Don't Kyle me, his son snaps. His voice echoes too loud in the open air. You sold my car. Now you're stealing my reputation. Edward's gaze doesn't waver. You can't steal what's abandoned. The words are quiet, but cut clean. A few of the younger workers glance at each other, unsure whether to keep working or pretend not to hear. Kyle steps closer, his anger unraveling into something rawer. You think you can just take everything? Kyle spits. You humiliated me, Dad. At work, in public. They're all laughing. You made me look like... Edward interrupts, tone level. You made yourself look like that. I just stopped holding up the mirror for you. Kyle's face twists. You don't get it. You're dragging our name through the mud. This... He gestures around them, to the trucks, the crates, the old logo revived. This is a joke. You're a relic, playing businessman again for pity. Edward's eyes flick to the men watching from the shadows of the bay. That relic built what you stand on. And when you forgot what it meant, someone had to remind you. Kyle laughs bitterly. You think this proves something? You think this makes you better than me? Edward doesn't rise to the bait. He sets his clipboard down, the sound sharp against the metal table. No, son, it proves I'm still willing to work for what I have. That's all. Kyle's anger falters for a heartbeat, then returns sharper, thinner. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching me fall apart while everyone calls you some kind of hero. Edward steps closer, the air between them tight with years of unspoken truth. You call it falling apart, he says quietly. I call it consequence. The silence stretches. Around them, the workers have stopped pretending not to listen. The scene has turned theatrical. Father and son, pride against principle, surrounded by the sound of distant engines and the hum of fluorescent lights. Kyle's shoulders tremble slightly. He looks younger now, not the confident manager from his office, but the boy who once begged for help after wrecking his first car. His voice cracks when he speaks. Why couldn't you just talk to me? Edward studies him for a long moment, something like sadness flickering across his face. I did, Kyle. You just called it interference. That lands harder than any shout could have. Kyle looks away, jaw clenched, eyes wet but unyielding. You're still trying to control me. Edward exhales slowly, then shakes his head. No. I stopped trying the moment you mistook respect for control. He picks up his clipboard again, checks a line item, and turns to one of the workers nearby. Let's get that delivery out by noon. And just like that, he walks away. Kyle stands frozen, surrounded by eyes that no longer see him as the authority in the room. Edward's voice carries across the warehouse, calm, direct, purposeful, as he resumes giving orders. The sound of forklifts starting back up drowns out the silence between them. Kyle's lips part as if to say something, anything, but no words come. His father doesn't look back. The camera follows Edward's steady stride through the sunlight streaming from the open bay door, his shadow, long, unwavering. Behind him, Kyle's reflection lingers faintly in the polished surface of a truck mirror, small, blurred, shrinking with distance. The old man keeps walking, the rhythm of his boots on concrete matching the pulse of his newfound life. A man who's finally moved past the need to be understood. The late afternoon light spills into Edward's kitchen, stretching long gold lines across the tiled floor. The house smells faintly of oil and cedar, remnants from the warehouse, from work that now fills his days with a steadier rhythm than peace ever did. He's sitting at the table, sorting invoices and delivery forms, when a knock sounds at the back door. It's Beth. She lets herself in, as she always has, holding a casserole dish wrapped in a towel. "You've lost weight," she says by way of greeting. "That's how I know you're working too much." Edward gives her a small smile. "You always said work keeps men honest." "Honest, yes," she replies, setting the dish down, "but not hardened." He leans back, the chair creaking beneath him. "You're here about Kyle." Beth sighs, her breath heavy. "Word travels. He came by the warehouse last week. I heard half the town knows about it now. The shouting, the scene." Edward doesn't flinch. "Then maybe they'll stop assuming I'm the fool in the story." Beth takes a seat across from him, folding her hands over the table. "You've made your point, Ed. Everyone sees it. You've got your business back, your name back. But he's still your son." Edward's eyes lift, cool but calm. "And I'm still the father he ignored." The answer lands sharp in the space between them. For a moment, neither speaks. The only sound is the soft ticking of the wall clock, marking the distance between then and now. Beth looks at him carefully. "You can't build peace on punishment. That's not who you are." His gaze drifts toward the window, to the yard beyond, the fading sunlight hitting the old pickup, the one that's carried him forward. "It's not vengeance," he says quietly. "It's gravity. Actions fall back where they're thrown." Beth tilts her head, hearing the conviction behind the calm. "Maybe," she says softly, "but gravity doesn't choose where things land, and if you're not careful, something you love gets crushed under it." Her words hang in the air like dust in sunlight, visible, unavoidable. Edward doesn't respond. He picks up a folder from the table, leafing through it without focus. But his movement's slow. His silence speaks louder than denial. Beth watches him for a long moment, then stands. "You think I don't understand?" she says gently. "I've been angry too, at my kids, at the years that didn't go the way I planned. But anger's a seed. You water it, it takes the garden." Edward's eyes flicker toward her, a hint of gratitude hidden beneath the guarded distance. She moves, towards the counter, resting her hand on the framed photograph beside the lamp. Maggie smiling, young. The photo's glass has dulled over time, but her warmth hasn't faded from the image. Beth touches it carefully. "She'd tell you to be careful, you know." Edward's jaw tightens. "She told me that about everything." "And she was usually right," Beth says with a small smile. He doesn't answer. His eyes linger on the picture, Maggie in the sunlight, frozen in a time when family didn't mean fracture. For the first time in weeks, doubt flickers behind his stillness. His hand moves, almost unconsciously, to straighten the frame. Beth sees it, that small human hesitation, and it softens her expression. "Then make sure nothing breaks when they land, Ed," she says, her voice quieter now. He doesn't look at her when he replies. "Something already did." The words come out low, final. Beth knows there's no persuading him tonight. She collects her dish, offers one last look, and leaves without another word. The door closes behind her with a soft click. Edward remains at the table, staring at the fading light through the window. The last rays catch the edges of Maggie's photo, setting it aglow for a moment before dusk swallows it whole. He sits back, the room dim around him. The quiet stretches. Then, almost imperceptibly, he exhales, slow, deliberate. His eyes shift toward the stack of papers waiting by his hand. One final move, he thinks. Just one more, clean, decisive, irreversible. The camera lingers on the half-lit photo of Maggie as the screen fades to black. her gentle smile the only thing left, glowing in the dark. The downtown cafe is quiet in the early afternoon, all soft jazz and the low hum of business conversations. Edward sits near the window, a cup of black coffee cooling beside him, his expression calm but calculated. Across the table sits Dan Harwood, Kyle's boss. The man's suit is crisp, his watch gleaming, his posture confident in that way executives carry themselves when they're used to saying yes, only to profit. Edward studies him for a moment before speaking. "I appreciate you taking the time, Mr. Harwood." Dan leans back. When a man asks for a meeting without saying why, curiosity tends to win. Edward nods, his tone measured. "I won't waste your time. You're running into a logistics bottleneck, aren't you? Fleet shortfall, higher demand, not enough reliable haulers." Dan raises an eyebrow. "You've done your homework." "I built my living on it," Edward replies. 30 years of hauling before I sold the company. I've recently reopened. Smaller scale, but fully equipped. I can handle your overflow routes cheaper than your current third-party providers." Dan studies him for a long moment, the skepticism softening into interest. "You're telling me Grant Hauling is back in business?" Edward smiles faintly. "Back and running clean." The boss folds his hands. "And this wouldn't have anything to do with your son working under me, would it?" Edward meets his gaze without flinching. "It has everything to do with the work, Mr. Harwood, nothing more." Dan chuckles, the kind of laugh that acknowledges both the truth and the theater of denial. "Well, even if it did, I can't fault the offer. We're behind schedule. You handle the overflow. I cut costs. Win-win." Edward reaches into his folder and slides over a typed proposal. Clean, concise, with rates highlighted. "My trucks are already on standby. You'll have reliability. No missed deadlines, no excuses." Dan scans the page, his brow lifting slightly. "You're undercutting our current provider by 20%. "Because I don't have shareholders," Edward says simply. That earns another quiet laugh. Dan sets down the paper, extends a hand. "All right, Mr. Grant, let's give this partnership a shot." Edward shakes it, his grip steady. "You'll have my routes by tomorrow morning." When they stand, Dan adds with a smirk, "This'll make for an interesting office story." Edward just replies, "Stories tend to write themselves, given time." The next morning, Kyle arrives at work a few minutes late, his tie slightly crooked, his mood brittle from a sleepless night. The office hums with quiet chatter, but something feels different, a subtle shift in tone. When he reaches his desk, his inbox is flooded with scheduling updates and client memos. At first, he thinks it's a system glitch. Then, he starts reading. Account reassignment notice. Effective immediately, Regional Hauling for Midwest Distribution transferred to Grant Hauling, LLC. Each line stings sharper than the last. Every major route he managed, every client he cultivated, has been reassigned. His workload isn't just lighter, it's gutted. He pushes back from his desk, face pale, pulse hammering. No, that's not possible. Across the aisle, Neil looks up from his monitor, clearly aware. "You didn't hear? Corporate brought in a new subcontractor. Some local outfit undercut everyone. Guess who's running it?" Kyle stares at him, not breathing. "Who?" Neil shrugs. "Grant Hauling. Your dad, right?" The sound of the name hits like a slow collapse. Grant Hauling. His father's ghost in corporate ink. Kyle sinks back into his chair, the realization slamming through him like cold water. "My father just bought my route," he whispers. A quiet voice comes from behind him. "Then maybe earn it back." He turns. Amber stands in the doorway, arms crossed, watching him with the kind of clarity that comes after disillusionment. Kyle searches her face for sympathy and finds none, only truth. "You don't understand," he says, his voice thin. "I do," she replies. "You thought being above him made you free, but you're still in his shadow, Kyle. You always were." He doesn't answer. Just looks past her toward the wide office window. The city stretches out below, cold and gray, reflecting in the glass, his own reflection faint and smaller than he remembers. Down in the streets, trucks move steadily through the traffic. Old trucks, painted with the revived Grant Hauling logo, bold against the concrete, He stands there for a long time, watching one of them disappear into the distance, and as it fades, the truth settles like dust, quiet, heavy, impossible to ignore. For the first time in his life, Kyle Grant stands beneath the man he spent years trying to rise above. The scene closes on his reflection in the glass, half shadow, half ghost, as the sound of engines hums beneath him, a reminder that his father's world still runs without him. The ballroom at the downtown convention center hums with polite conversation and the rustle of pressed suits. Banners line the walls, Twin Cities Logistics Forum, building ethical routes for the future, the kind of event where success smells faintly of coffee and ambition. Edward stands behind the podium, a small note card in hand, though he barely glances at it. The microphone catches his steady breath. He looks out over the crowd, business owners, truckers, journalists, industry leaders, faces that once wouldn't have turned his way. Now they listen. "We built our work on reliability," he says, his voice calm but resonant. Not speed, not shine, just the promise that if a man calls, someone will show up. The audience leans in. It's the kind of quiet that only comes when truth is being spoken without decoration. In the back of the hall, the doors swing open. A gust of cold air follows, slicing through the stillness. Heads turn. Kyle. He strides down the aisle in a tailored suit, eyes locked on his father, jaw tight. He looks like a man walking toward a fight he's already lost but refuses to concede. Edward sees him coming but doesn't stop speaking. "And when that promise is broken," he continues, "you don't rebuild with apologies. You rebuild with action." Kyle stops halfway down the aisle. "Action?" His voice rings out sharp. "Is that what you call sabotage?" The room freezes. Conversations die instantly. Edward lowers the microphone slightly, studying his son. Kyle takes another step forward, face flushed, voice rising. "You took my clients, my reputation. You humiliated me in front of my entire industry. You call that ethics?" The crowd murmurs, the tension rippling through the room. Edward's calm doesn't waver. He looks at his son with a kind of weary patience. "I just answered a call no one else would pick up." The silence that follows is thick enough to hold. A journalist near the front lowers her pen, eyes wide. A few older business owners nod slowly, the weight of experience behind their understanding. Kyle's voice breaks the stillness again, harsher this time. "You think that line makes you noble? You're just jealous I made it further than you ever did." Edward finally steps away from the podium, his tone even, quiet but unshakable. "If further means forgetting where you started, then maybe you've been running in circles." A low murmur spreads through the crowd, some uneasy, some impressed. Kyle looks around, realizing too late the camera's pointed their way, the phones raised. He sees faces registering pity instead of respect, curiosity instead of fear. Edward doesn't move toward him, doesn't raise his voice. "You want to talk about sabotage, son? You sabotaged yourself. All I did was stop cleaning up the wreckage." For a long moment, no one breathes. Then, somewhere near the back, someone claps. Once, twice. Then more join in. It's not thunderous, not mocking. It's slow, deliberate, the kind of applause that carries weight. Kyle's face drains of color. He turns abruptly, pushing through the crowd, the sound of applause chasing him down the aisle like judgment. The doors slam behind him, the echo ringing through the hall. Edward stands still for a moment, the applause tapering into silence. He nods once, not triumphant, not smug, simply acknowledging that the storm has passed. He picks up his notes, clears his throat, and finishes quietly. Ethics isn't about who wins, it's about who keeps showing up. The crowd rises in another round of applause, louder this time, accompanied by the flash of cameras. Photographers move closer, snapping pictures. Edward standing tall under the banner, the man who turned humiliation into legacy. By morning, headlines will tell the story. The comeback father. Local businessman reclaims his name. Grant Halling triumphs with integrity. But as the night deepens, Edward drives home through quiet streets, the city lights flickering in his side mirror. The pickup hums steadily beneath him, the same old rhythm that carried him through harder years. He passes shuttered storefronts, empty intersections, neon signs reflected in the wet pavement. There's no smile on his face, only stillness. Revenge, he realizes, doesn't burn hot. It cools slowly, settling like frost, where warmth used to live. He turns down his street, headlights sweeping across the front of his house. For a moment, his eyes drift to the passenger seat, where Maggie's photo lies folded in a newspaper, her face lit faintly by the dashboard glow. He exhales, long and quiet. The victory feels colder than he imagined. The camera lingers on his silhouette behind the windshield as the truck turns the final corner, disappearing into the night, the sound of the applause still faintly echoing, long after it's lost its warmth. Rain streaks the windows of Kyle's apartment, soft at first, then steady, a rhythm that fills the silence he's been avoiding all morning. Boxes line the floor. The closet door hangs open, half empty. Amber moves methodically through the room, folding clothes into a suitcase, her motions quiet but firm, final. Kyle leans against the doorway, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "You don't have to do this," he says. His voice sounds smaller than he wants it to. Amber doesn't look up. "Yes, I do." He takes a step closer. "You're overreacting. Things are just rough right now. It'll smooth out." She zips the suitcase, her expression tired, her voice calm, the kind of calm that means she's past anger. "Kyle, I've been telling myself that for a year." He tries to laugh, but it catches in his throat. "You're really walking out because of this? Because my dad—" "This isn't about your dad," she interrupts, turning to face him. "It's about you. You only love control. That's all this ever was. A power trip. The job, the car, even me. You wanted to be the one in charge." He stiffens. "That's not fair." Amber shakes her head. "No. What's not fair is how you treat people who don't give you what you want. Your father didn't bend, and you hate him for it. But I won't bend either, Kyle. I'm done being driven." The words hang there like the echo of a slammed door. She reaches into her purse and pulls out a small silver key, his spare. She places it gently on the counter between them. The metal clinks once, sharp in the quiet. For a second, he just stares at it. That small, familiar shape. A symbol of entry, of ownership, now lying still and cold. The echo of another set of keys flashes through his mind. The BMW, the sound they made when his father handed them over years ago. That same sound now rings with finality. "Amber," he starts, but the plea dies halfway. She shoulders her bag and walks to the door. "Goodbye, Kyle." When the door shuts, the silence expands until it fills everything. He stands there for a long time, listening to the distant hum of traffic, the muted sound of her footsteps fading down the hallway. Then, through the window, he catches the glow of her taillights disappearing into the rain. They linger at the intersection, red against the gray, before turning out of sight. The last color in his world fades with them. For a long while, he doesn't move. The apartment feels bigger, emptier, every surface reflecting the hollow noise of his own breathing. He presses a hand against the counter where the key still lies. Its edges bite against his skin, grounding him in the reality he doesn't want to face. Across town, Beth stops by Edward's shop, rain still clinging to her coat. "Heard from Amber," she says softly, leaning against the doorway. "She's gone." Edward doesn't look up from his workbench. "I figured." "She said he didn't even chase her," Beth adds, "just stood there." Edward picks up a cloth, polishing the handle of an old wrench. One of the first he ever owned. The metal gleams faintly in the low light. "Some lessons only hit after everyone's gone," he says quietly. Beth studies him. "You're not even a little glad?" He shakes his head. "Gladness doesn't fit this kind of ending." She nods, leaving him to the silence of the workshop. The camera lingers on Edward as he wipes each tool with care. Wrenches, sockets, screwdrivers, instruments of repair, of rebuilding. The rhythmic motion steadies him. The hum of rain against the window syncs with his slow, deliberate movements. His reflection in the metal catches the lamplight, weary but resolved. A quiet voiceover carries his thought, low and measured. Possession teaches nothing. Loss. Everything. The shot lingers on the old wrench in his hand, clean now, restored, before fading to black, the sound of the rain easing into stillness. The envelope arrives on a Tuesday morning, plain, white, and far too official-looking to ignore. Kyle finds it sitting squarely in the center of his desk when he walks into the office, his name printed neatly above the seal of the Internal Revenue Service. He stares at it for a long moment before tearing it open. The sound of paper ripping cuts through the quiet like a blade. Inside, a single page. Notice of audit. Unverified deductions and personal expense discrepancies. His eyes race across the lines, each word striking harder than the last. Misfiled deductions. Corporate perks listed as personal expenses. Penalties pending. For the first time in weeks, his hands tremble. He grabs his phone, scrolls to the contact he hasn't dared to call in months. Dad. His thumb hovers, then presses. The ringing feels endless, every tone a reminder of the silence between them. Finally, Edward answers. His voice is calm, almost measured. Kyle. Dad, The words tumble out, choked with panic. I just got a notice, an audit. I don't even know how this happened. They're saying I misfiled something. It's serious. Edward doesn't interrupt. He lets the silence stretch just long enough to make the space between them feel like a chasm. Dad, please, Kyle says, his voice breaking now. You always handled that stuff better than me. You know the system. Can you just look at this for me? Tell me what to do. Edward exhales softly. It's not the sigh of irritation. It's the quiet sound of an old truth finally being spoken aloud. You always thought I was baggage, he says slowly. Now you're lost luggage. The words land heavy, deliberate. They aren't shouted. They don't need to be. Dad. But the line goes dead. Kyle stares at the phone screen, the call timer frozen for a heartbeat before disappearing. He lowers the phone, his grip loose, his hand pale. For a moment, he just sits there, breathing shallowly, trying to convince himself it didn't just happen. Then he sinks into his chair. The office around him fades, the chatter, the typing, the faint hum of the HVAC system. All of it blurs into the background. He stares. At the audit notice lying flat on his desk, the government seal like a stamp of inevitability. For years, he'd built his life on the idea that control meant strength, that distance meant dignity. Now, in the silence of his glass-walled office, surrounded by the fragments of what used to be success, he finally understands how far that distance really stretched. He presses his palms against his eyes, but the tears come anyway. Slow, reluctant, not for the money or the reputation, but for the space he carved between himself and the only man who ever waited for him to come home. Across town, the morning looks different. Edward sits at his desk in the quiet of his small office, the air filled with the low hum of a heater and the smell of coffee gone cold. A stack of papers sits in front of him, financial ledgers, receipts, a donation form waiting for a signature. Beth stands nearby, reading over his shoulder. Half your profits? She asks softly. That's not a small sum. He nods, signing the document with a steady hand. It's not supposed to be. She looks at the letterhead, St. Paul Trade School Scholarship Fund, for students of integrity and craft. Rebuilding takes more than wooden trucks, Edward says quietly. It takes hands, people willing to learn the right way. Beth studies him, then smiles faintly. You're putting the name back where it belongs. He doesn't answer, just slides the signed document into an envelope and seals it shut. Outside, the sound of a passing truck rumbles down the street, one of his own. Edward leans back, eyes distant. Possession never taught me much, he says softly, but loss did. Beth nods, her gaze lingering on him. Revenge balanced? He shakes his head. No, just corrected. The camera lingers on Edward's hand as he drops the envelope into the outgoing mail tray. One man losing everything, another rediscovering what it means to give. And between them, silence, the kind that no phone call can ever quite fill again. The blizzard came overnight, a white silence swallowing the city. Minneapolis wakes buried under a curtain of snow thick enough to mute the world. Power lines sag, tree limbs snap under the weight, and the only sounds left are the groans of wind and the faint rumble of engines that still dare to move. Edward Grant is one of those engines. His old pickup, the one he'd restored from rust, crawls through the neighborhood with chains gripped tight around its tires. The headlights cut through the storm like twin searchlights, casting brief halos across walls of swirling white. A shovel and a bag of salt sit in the truck bed. He's already cleared 3 driveways this morning, his, Beth's, and old Mrs. Taylor's, 2 doors down. Now he moves house to house, slow and deliberate, clearing paths so neighbors can reach the street if they need to. It's work that comes naturally, steady and useful, the kind that keeps a man's hands busy while his mind stays elsewhere. When he pulls up in front of Beth's, she's already outside in her coat, hair dusted with snow. "You're out early," she calls, raising her voice above the wind. "Can't sit still," he replies, stepping down from the truck. His breath fogs in the air. "You never could," she says, smiling faintly. "City's half frozen. You trying to save it?" "Just doing what I can reach," he says, picking up the shovel. The scrape of metal against the driveway drowns out everything else. Beth watches for a moment, arms crossed, before saying quietly, "Kyle called me yesterday. He's still lost." Edward pauses mid-shovel but doesn't look up. He'll find his way when the road's clear. It's the closest thing to forgiveness he's offered in months, and Beth hears it, even if he won't admit it. An hour later, Edward finishes the last driveway, his shoulders stiff, his gloves soaked through. The wind has picked up, thick snow tumbling sideways now, stinging his face. He climbs back into the pickup, wipes condensation from the windshield, and turns onto the main road. The city looks ghostly, traffic lights flashing red and green against white nothingness. He drives slow, steady, eyes narrowing against the blowing snow. Then, as he rounds an intersection, something catches his eye. A car, half buried, tires spinning uselessly. A rental sedan, familiar shape, familiar problem. Kyle. He's out of the car, coat unzipped, trying to push from behind. Snow flies from the tires, black rubber screaming against ice. He looks smaller than Edward remembers, not in size, but in stature. Weakened. The wind tears through the space between them, howling like unfinished business. Edward eases his truck to a crawl, watching. His hands tighten on the steering wheel. For a long moment, he does nothing. Just sits there, the engine idling low, headlights cutting across the frozen scene. He could keep driving. No one would blame him. Not after everything. But he doesn't. He throws the truck in park, steps out into the storm, and walks toward the stranded car without a word. Kyle looks up, startled. Their eyes meet through the swirling snow. No words, no thaw. Just recognition. Edward moves to the back bumper. "Get in," he says simply. Kyle hesitates, then obeys. Edward plants his boots, braces his shoulders, and starts to push. The truck engine roars as he gives one last heave. The sedan jerks forward, tires gripping at last, crawling free from the rut. The moment it steadies, Edward steps back, brushing snow from his gloves. Kyle climbs out, breathless, face flushed from cold and shame. "Dad." Edward doesn't let him finish. He nods once, silent, then walks back to his pickup. He climbs in, shuts the door, and shifts into gear. The truck pulls away, tires crunching over ice, leaving behind nothing but the churned snow where he'd stood. Kyle stands in the road, watching the taillights vanish into the storm. No wave, no thank you. Just a stillness that feels heavier than apology. He realizes, as the wind fills the empty space again, that his father didn't come to forgive him, and maybe that's what makes it hit harder. Across the next block, Edward's headlights blur into the white distance, swallowed by the falling snow. His expression is unreadable, not anger, not satisfaction, just quiet resolve. He grips the steering wheel tighter, the heater humming softly, the rhythm of the wipers steady against the glass. Outside, the storm rages on. Inside, the man who once taught his son everything about driving just keeps going, clearing paths, one road at a time, leaving behind lessons that need no words at all. And as the wind howls through the city, the image of father and son, one freed, one departing, lingers in the snow, cold and unbroken. Snow drifts through the open gate of the city impound lot, coating the rows of forgotten machines in thin white dust. The air smells of oil, rust, and frozen metal, the scent of things once prized, now reduced to paperwork and waiting. Edward Grant stands near the back of the crowd, collar turned up against the cold, hands tucked into his coat pockets. His breath fogs faintly in the air as the auctioneer's voice carries through the loudspeakers, clipped, efficient, detached. Next item on the docket, 2018 BMW 5 Series, repossessed, outstanding. Condition, starting bid, $5,000. Edward's eyes lift. There it is, black paint dulled by grime, wheels half buried in slush, but unmistakable. Kyle's BMW, the one that began it all. The auctioneer rattles off the specs. Full payment required today, title clean, sold as is. No one moves at first. The crowd shifts, murmuring. It's an odd item for this crowd, too refined for contractors and scrap dealers, too tainted for the luxury bidders. Edward raises his hand. 5,000. The auctioneer nods. We have 5. Do I hear 6? Silence. The cold wind cuts through the lot, scattering snow against boots and pant legs. 5,000 once, the man calls. 5,000 twice. Edward's face remains still, his gaze steady on the car. Not longing, not nostalgia, just quiet observation. Sold, the auctioneer declares, slamming the gavel. To bidder 21. A few heads turn. No one recognizes him. He steps forward, signs the paper, and accepts the receipt without comment. It's a simple transaction, but for Edward, it's more than that. It's the closing of a circle. By afternoon, he's driving the BMW, not home, not to his warehouse, but across town to a modest brick building with a faded sign that reads, Helping Hands, Auto Donation Center. The tires hum against the icy road, the car smooth even after its time sitting idle. The interior smells faintly of leather and memory. At a stoplight, Edward glances at the passenger seat. Maggie's old scarf sits folded neatly beside him. She used to leave it there during winter drives, back when the world felt simpler. He touches it once, then looks back at the road. When he pulls into the lot, a young man in a parka greets him. You here to donate, sir? Edward nods. Yes, this one. The man whistles low, impressed. BMW like this? You sure? Quite sure, Edward says. They handle the paperwork inside. Quick signatures, a handshake, a thank you. As he turns to leave, Beth's voice calls from the doorway. She's holding 2 cups of coffee, steam curling into the cold air. Couldn't stay away from the snow, could you? Edward half smiles, taking 1 cup. Thought I'd bury something. Beth nods toward the car outside. That was Kyle's, wasn't it? He takes a sip, the warmth grounding him. Used to be. She studies him, curious. Why not keep it? After all the trouble it caused. Feels like it should stay with you. Edward's eyes follow the car through the window. A volunteer has already started it, the engine purring softly, ready for its next drive. It never really took me anywhere, he says quietly. Beth tilts her head. Still, you could have sold it again, made a bit back. He shakes his head. Some things pay better when they leave. Outside, the young volunteer puts the car in gear, easing it toward the exit. Snow flurries swirl around the tires, blurring the edges of the vehicle as it pulls into the street. The taillights glow red for a moment, then vanish into the white. Edward stands there a long while, watching the space where it disappears. The world feels lighter, not joyful, not triumphant, just less burdened. Beth slips her arm through his. You done fighting ghosts? He exhales, slow and even. Not fighting, just letting them drive off. The two of them turn back toward the truck, the snow crunching underfoot. Behind them, the lot returns to stillness. Rows of forgotten cars under a fresh coat of white, each one a small monument to someone's unfinished story. Edward looks up at the gray sky, flakes catching in his hair. There's peace in his face now, the kind that comes when closure doesn't need applause. As they climb into the pickup, Beth glances back once more. Feels like a burial, she says. It is, Edward replies, and this time I'm not the one left behind. He starts the engine, and they drive off together, the snow falling heavier now, soft, relentless, cleansing. Behind them, the BMW's fading tracks dissolve beneath fresh snowfall, erased by time before anyone else can follow them. The sound of tape peeling from the cardboard box echoes through the near-empty townhouse. Kyle crouches by the front window, folding the last of his belongings, clothes, a few dishes, papers he can't bring himself to throw away. The walls are bare now, the once polished furniture gone, leaving scuffed outlines where better days used to rest. Outside, a moving truck idles, exhaust clouding in the cold air. The landlord's footsteps creak faintly upstairs. The lease has run out, and so has the money. Kyle looks around the living room one last time. The space feels too clean, too quiet, stripped of the arrogance that once filled it. It's just a shell now, much like him. He takes a deep breath, picks up the final box, marked personal, and carries it down to the car. The drive across town is short but heavy, snow falling in soft, steady flakes. His new apartment waits on the second floor of a gray, aging complex. The building hums with the muted sounds of life, televisions behind thin walls, pipes clanking, footsteps overhead. Inside, the space is small. One bedroom, one window, one man starting over. He unpacks slowly, each item a quiet confession. Suits go into a single, narrow closet, dishes into a chipped cabinet. He opens the last box and finds it filled with fragments of another life. Loose papers, a half-empty bottle of cologne, and near the bottom, an old photograph. It's bent at the corners, colors fading, but still clear. Him, no older than 7, standing in the driveway beside his father. Edward's hands rest on his shoulders, steady, proud. The boy in the picture is holding a wrench almost too big for him, smiling at something just off camera. Maggie, most likely. Kyle sits on the floor, staring at the photo. The silence presses against his chest, until it breaks into quiet, uneven breaths. For the first time in years, the weight of everything he's lost feels real. Not as anger, not as pride, but as absence. His throat tightens. I'm sorry, he whispers to no one. Then, almost reflexively, he reaches for his phone. His fingers hover over the screen before he types the same 2 words, I'm sorry. He stares at them for a long moment, thumb trembling above, send. Then he presses it. Across the city, Edward sits in his small living room, the lamplight soft on the worn pages of Maggie's journal. He's been reading old entries, her handwriting looping across the paper, each word a reminder of gentler wisdom. The journal has become a quiet companion, one that speaks without judgment. His phone buzzes on the table beside him. He glances at it, expecting another work message or bank alert. Instead, the screen glows with Kyle's name. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. Edward studies the message, the way it sits alone in the blue bubble. No excuses, no preamble, no punctuation. He sets the phone down, face first, the screen light fading into black. His eyes drift back to Maggie's journal. He flips to the next blank page, the pen already waiting in the crease. For a moment, he doesn't write. The quiet feels like breath held between past and present. Then, slowly, he puts the pen to paper. Closure. He underlines it once, the ink dark and certain. Outside, wind rattles softly against the windows. The snow continues to fall. Not angry, not cold, just constant. Edward closes the journal and sits back in his chair, his face unreadable, his silence neither forgiveness nor rejection. The camera pans to the phone on the table, still dark, untouched. No reply. Miles away, Kyle stares at his own phone, waiting for a response that doesn't come. The apartment hums with the low buzz of the radiator, the world outside muffled by snow. He looks again at the photo in his hand, the child smiling, the father steady beside him. Tears blur the image until both faces fade into one. The scene lingers there, 2 men separated by words unspoken, bound by the same quiet grief. And in the hush between them, the story exhales. Not with an ending, just the soft weight of understanding, late but finally earned. The morning light drifts over the quiet street, soft and pale against the thinning snow. Beth's house stands half-packed, curtains gone, walls bare, the air carrying that distinct emptiness of a home about to change hands. The sound of cardboard rustling and the slow drag of tape fills the space, punctuated by the occasional sigh. Edward stands in the doorway, coat zipped, hands in his pockets. He watches as movers lift boxes onto the truck parked by the curb. A for sale sign leans in the snow, a red sold sticker plastered across it. "So, this is really it," he says quietly. Beth looks up from a half-sealed box and smiles, though it doesn't quite reach her eyes. "It's time," she says. "My daughter's been after me for years to move closer. Figured if I don't do it now, I never will." Edward nods, scanning the walls that once held photos, laughter, late-night coffee talks. He's been here 100 times, through storms, through quiet evenings, through moments he'd rather not remember. The house feels smaller now, or maybe they've both just grown heavier with the weight of what's past. Beth dusts her hands and sits on the step near the window. "You've been quiet lately," she says, "even for you." "Quiet suits me," he replies. "Quiet's good," she says softly, "but peace is better." She gestures for him to sit beside her. "You built peace, Edward. Don't live in the ruins of it." He takes a seat, the wood creaking beneath them. "Ruins still stand," he murmurs. "They remind you what survived." She looks at him, really looks. "You did more than survive. You made things right. Maybe not clean, maybe not pretty, but right. That's something." He lets out a breath that's half a laugh, half a release. "I didn't do it alone." Beth shakes her head with mock disapproval. "Don't get sentimental on me now." He smiles faintly. "Just saying the truth. You pulled me back when I wanted to go too far. You kept me human." "That was a full-time job," she teases gently, though her voice catches. "You've got more patience than most, Ed, even when you thought you didn't." He glances around the empty room. Patience isn't peace, but it's close. Outside, one of the movers waves from the truck, signaling they're done. Beth stands, brushing her hands off. "Well," she says, her tone lighter than her eyes, "that's that." Edward rises too, and for a moment neither moves. The silence between them isn't awkward. It's layered, full of everything they've been through together. The loss, the rebuilding, the unspoken understanding that some friendships run deeper than time. She steps forward and wraps her arms around him. "Thank you," she says softly. "For listening when you didn't want to, for not letting bitterness take you whole." He hugs her back, the gesture small but steady. "Thank you," he murmurs, "for steering me through anger." She pulls back, smiling through misted eyes. "Drive safe, will you? Whatever you're driving next." That earns her a quiet chuckle, one of those rare sounds that soften his whole face. "I'll try not to hit anything I can't fix." Beth grins, shakes her head. "You always did think everything could be fixed." He shrugs. "Most things can. Some just take longer." The movers call out a final goodbye as they climb into the truck. Beth lingers by the porch steps, waving as they start the engine. Edward walks her to the edge of the drive, where the snow's begun to melt into slush. The air smells of winter easing its grip, the faint promise of change beneath the cold. "I'll miss this street," she says. "It's quieter because of you." "Maybe it'll stay that way," he answers. She gives him one last look, a look that says more than goodbye ever could, then climbs into the moving van. The door shuts with a soft thud. The truck pulls away slowly, tires crunching over the packed snow. Edward watches as the taillights fade down the long stretch of road until they vanish into the pale horizon. The world goes still again. He stands there alone for a while, hands in his coat pockets, the wind brushing through the branches overhead. Snow drifts across the driveway, filling the tire tracks she left behind. The camera lingers on him, a solitary figure against a white, windswept yard. The man who once built a life from love, lost it to pride, and rebuilt it in silence. The wind howls once more, carrying with it the echo of her voice. Don't live in the ruins. Edward looks toward the horizon, then down at the road ahead, quiet, open, waiting. Fade out on the sound of the wind over the snow-covered drive. The thaw comes slow to Minnesota, the kind of spring that still breathes winter's chill at dawn, but softens by noon, melting the edges of snow into streams that curl through gravel and memory. Edward Grant stands in his driveway, one hand resting on the hood of his pickup, the same old truck he'd rescued from rust and silence. The metal gleams under the weak morning sun, every dent now polished, every bolt tightened by his own hand. It isn't new, but it's honest. Like him. He wipes his palms on a rag, slides into the driver's seat, and turns the key. The engine growls to life, rough for a second, then steady, low, like a voice clearing its throat before a long story. The road ahead glistens wet from melted snow, stretching toward the open country. Edward shifts into gear and eases forward, the tires crunching over what's left of the season. On the radio, an old country song hums, something about lost time and found roads, the kind of tune that carries both ache and comfort. The singer's voice drifts through static. The farther I go, the closer I get to where I began. Edward's lips twitch in a quiet smile. He rolls down the window. Cold air floods the cab, sharp but clean. The fields on either side are still sleeping, patches of ice glinting between dark soil and golden stubble. The horizon looks endless, soft, forgiving. As miles unfold beneath the wheels, his mind flickers, not sharply, but like old film reels rewinding in sunlight. He sees the airport curb, that first wound, himself standing with his suitcase in the cold, waiting for a son who never came. The sting that started it all. Then the living room, loud with music, where laughter spilled through his house like trespass. The BMWs gleam in the driveway. The dinner he wasn't welcome at. The memories blur, each fading into the next, until they dissolve completely. They don't burn anymore. They just pass. Ghosts seen from a moving car already miles behind. He drives with one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on the gear shift. Every mile feels earned, not from victory, but from endurance. He's not driving away anymore, not driving toward anything either, just driving through. The highway opens wider now, framed by patches of thawed earth and sky so clear it feels almost too big. His reflection flashes across the side mirror, gray hair, sun-lined face, steady eyes. There's peace in the lines, not regret. A soft voiceover takes shape, not spoken aloud, but rising from the calm inside him. Every road circles home, some just take longer to learn the turns. The music fades lower as he glances to the passenger seat. Maggie's old scarf rests there again, folded neatly, his quiet companion. He reaches over, brushing his fingers against the fabric. The wind from the open window catches its edge, and for a second, it lifts, weightless, alive, before settling back. Edward chuckles softly. "You'd like this stretch," he says under his breath. No traffic, no noise, just room. The truck hums on, its engine blending with the sound of wind and radio static. The road crests a hill, then dips gently toward the horizon. Ahead, everything looks wider, the kind of distance that doesn't threaten but invites. The camera widens too. The truck becomes smaller, framed against the endless Minnesota sky. The fields on either side shimmer with melting snow, thin streams tracing silver veins through the earth. The song on the radio fades to its final verse, voice low and raw. Sometimes you leave to find your way back. Edward smiles, faint, real, and taps the steering wheel once, a small rhythm of satisfaction. His eyes stay fixed on the horizon, where the sun finally breaks free from the clouds, painting the world in gold. The camera pans higher, the truck a speck of movement on a ribbon of highway that stretches without end. The shot lingers, quiet, open, infinite, a visual exhale. Then gently, the scene fades to white, leaving only the hum of the engine and the whisper of a man who finally learned to let go. The gymnasium smells faintly of sawdust and polish, the kind of scent that lingers in places built by hands, not blueprints. Rows of folding chairs line the floor, filled with students in clean work shirts and worn jeans. The banners hanging from the rafters read St. Paul Trade Institute, Annual Honors Night. Beneath them, a podium stands draped with a white cloth, the words, "The Edward Grant Scholarship for Integrity and Craftsmanship," stitched neatly across the front. Edward stands near the stage, adjusting his jacket. He looks uncomfortable in the spotlight, though his face carries the calm of someone who's learned to sit quietly with himself. The principal finishes the introductions, words about dedication, humility, and second chances, before motioning for him to step forward. The applause that rises is warm but modest, genuine in a way he hasn't felt in years. Edward walks to the podium, nodding politely to the crowd. He clears his throat once, glances down at his notes, then decides against reading them. "I never liked speeches much," he begins, voice low, steady. "I've always believed work should speak for itself. But tonight isn't about me. It's about all of you, the ones who show up early, who stay late, who take pride in what your hands can do." He pauses, eyes scanning the faces in front of him. They're young, eyes bright, shoulders strong, lives still unfolding. "When I was your age," he continues, "I thought hard work was enough. Later, I learned that respect matters more. Not the kind you demand, but the kind you earn by showing up when no one's watching." There's a quiet murmur of agreement from the back rows. Edward lets the silence stretch before adding softly, "Keep your word, keep your craft. The world needs more people who can do both." Applause breaks again, longer this time, not for the polish of the speech, but the truth of it. Edward steps aside as the first scholarship recipient walks up, a young man with grease-stained hands and eyes that look a lot like his own once did. They shake hands. "Thank you, Mr. Grant," the student says, voice trembling with emotion, "for believing in honest work." Edward's grip tightens slightly. "That's the only kind worth doing," he replies. The cameras flash. A reporter takes a note, but Edward hardly notices. His focus stays on the student, the handshake, the transfer of something wordless but solid between generations. Miles away, in a small apartment that still smells faintly of cardboard and reheated meals, Kyle sits at his kitchen table. The live stream plays on his laptop, the ceremony framed in the glow of the screen. The chat scrolls with hearts and thank yous, but Kyle doesn't type. He just watches. The camera pans across the stage, catching his father in profile, smiling slightly as he hands another certificate to a young woman. Kyle's throat tightens. The quiet in his apartment feels louder now, filled with all the words he never said. He taught more by silence than lectures, he murmurs. For the first time, the words don't sound bitter. They sound like truth. Back in the gym, the ceremony winds down. The crowd stands, clapping again, the kind of applause that doesn't fade right away. Edward steps down from the stage, shaking a few more hands, deflecting praise with polite nods. He's not used to being the center of admiration, but tonight, it feels earned. He takes out his phone as the crowd begins to disperse. A new message flashes from Beth. "Proud of you, old man." He smiles, small, private, and types back, "Finally proud of myself." Beth's reply comes a minute later, just a heart emoji. He chuckles softly, tucking the phone back into his pocket. The last students linger around him, their laughter echoing off the rafters. Edward looks up at the banner one more time, his name stitched beside the word integrity. It feels strange, seeing it there, heavy, yet peaceful. Outside, the sun is sinking, painting the parking lot in gold and rose. Edward steps into the light, hands in his pockets, the faint smile still on his face. The wind stirs, soft, cool, carrying the distant hum of traffic from the highway he drove that morning. The camera holds on him as he walks toward his pickup, the doors of the gym closing behind him. No grand ending, no applause chasing him into the evening. Just the quiet dignity of a man who finally made peace with his road and earned the right to keep driving forward. The late afternoon light slants through the high window of Edward Grant's garage, hitting dust in the air like slow-moving stars. The space is quiet except for the soft clink of metal on wood. He's cleaning, not because it's dirty, but because it's something to do, something rhythmic, ordered, predictable. Each wrench and screwdriver finds its place on the pegboard, lined perfectly by size. Every drawer shuts with a satisfying click. On one side of the room, an old workbench gleams faintly beneath the overhead bulb. It's the same bench where he fixed everything from toasters to transmissions, even the BMW once, back when it still felt like a shared thing instead of a dividing line. Now, it's just a workspace, simple and still. He wipes his hands on a rag, picks up a frame from the counter, and studies it for a long time. Inside the glass, a photograph of the BMW sitting in his driveway, sunlight bouncing off its hood. Underneath, on a small brass plate, are the words he'd had engraved that morning, paid in full. He stares at it, expression unreadable, not proud, not nostalgic, just finished. He hangs the frame on the far wall, just above the pegboard, perfectly centered. The rag hangs from his hand like a flag lowered at dusk. The sound of footsteps breaks the silence, soft, hesitant. He turns. Kyle stands in the doorway, framed by the fading daylight. He looks older, not in years, but in weight. He's holding 2 paper coffee cups, one in each hand. His posture is cautious, like a man approaching holy ground. Neither speaks for several seconds. Edward nods slightly, acknowledging the visitor without surprise. Kyle takes a few steps in, the gravel crunching faintly under his boots. He sets one of the cups down on the workbench beside the rag. The coffee steams between them, the scent warm, familiar. "I was in the area," Kyle says finally, his voice low, uncertain. "Figured you might want one." Edward studies him, then glances at the cup. "Thanks." Kyle nods once, eyes drifting to the wall. His gaze lands on the framed photo, the BMW, frozen forever in that image. "You kept a picture," he says quietly. Edward doesn't look up. "Not of the car?" he replies. "Of the lesson." Kyle's throat tightens at that. The air between them thickens, heavy with all the words neither has ever managed to say. Apologies would sound wrong now. Too late. Too clean. The silence feels truer. He shifts, hands in his pockets. Edward goes back to organizing his tools, each motion slow and precise. The only sounds are the faint creak of the pegboard hooks and the hum of the overhead light. After a moment, Kyle steps closer. He reaches out, takes one of the smaller wrenches from the bench, and turns it over in his hand, the same one he'd held as a boy in that old photograph. "You still keep everything in order," he says softly. "It's easier to find what you need that way," Edward answers without looking up. Kyle sets the wrench down gently, aligning it with the others. "Yeah," he murmurs. "Makes sense." Another stretch of silence. Not awkward, just vast. Both men standing in the same space, breathing the same air, yet divided by the long shadow of time and pride. Kyle finally straightens. "Guess I should let you get back to it." Edward turns then, meeting his eyes for the first time. No anger, no resentment, just a tired kind of clarity. The look of a man who has forgiven life, if not the people in it. He gives a single, deliberate nod. Kyle nods back, leaving the untouched coffee where it sits. He turns toward the door, pauses once, then walks into the fading light. The sound of his footsteps fades down the driveway. Edward watches until he disappears beyond the fence line, then reaches up and flips the switch. The bulb overhead clicks off. The garage falls into half darkness, golden light still spilling faintly from the window, enough to outline the photo on the wall. The BMW gleams behind glass, forever parked, its caption glinting in the dimness, paid in full. The camera lingers on that phrase as the wind hums softly outside. Two men bound not by forgiveness, but by the quiet understanding that sometimes absence is its own kind of connection. Fade out on the glow of the last light dying against the cold steel of the tools. The sky over Minneapolis is the color of smoke and steel, the kind of evening that holds both memory and release. Edward Grant drives slowly along the service road that runs parallel to the airport, the hum of his pickup blending with the distant thunder of departing jets. The headlights carve a narrow path through the dusk, their reflection catching on the wet asphalt like fleeting ghosts. He hasn't been here in over a year, not since that day with the suitcase, the cold curb, and the silence that started everything. Tonight, though, he isn't here for anyone, just to see what peace looks like when it finally stops hiding. Planes lift off one after another, bright streaks crossing the purple horizon, their engines echoing in long, fading notes. Each takeoff feels like punctuation, the kind that closes one story before another begins. Edward slows near the terminal lot, where families gather under the glow of the arrival sign. He finds a space, shifts into park, and lets the truck idle. Through the windshield, he watches the small, quiet theater of human reunion play out. A boy runs into his mother's arms. A couple kisses, laughing through tears. A man in a business suit kneels to hug his daughter, her pink suitcase dragging behind her. The scene is ordinary, but for Edward, it feels almost holy. The engine ticks softly as it cools. He leans back in his seat, the steering wheel pressing lightly against his palms. His eyes trace the movement of headlights and taxi lights, reflections flickering across the glass. The sound of the airport fills the cab, the rhythm of departures and arrivals, of people leaving and returning, all of it looping endlessly, like time itself. A faint smile begins to form, not from joy exactly, but from something quieter, understanding. He opens the small vent window, letting the cool night air wash through. The smell of jet fuel mixes with spring rain, sharp and clean. The same air he once stood in, waiting, feeling forgotten. But this time, he isn't waiting for anyone. His voice, older now, steadier, drifts in as a voiceover, more reflection than narration. People forget pickups go both ways, arrivals and departures. He pauses, the sound of a plane rising above him, underscoring the thought. We spend half our lives waiting for someone to show up, the rest learning when to leave. He reaches for the ignition, fingers brushing the key. For a moment, he doesn't turn it, just watches the planes climb through the dark, their lights fading into the vast, forgiving distance. Then he turns the key. The engine hums to life, a deep, familiar sound that settles into the quiet, like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. The radio flickers on softly, catching an old tune mid-verse, something simple, almost nostalgic, the kind of melody that belongs to open roads. Edward lets it play, tapping the steering wheel once in time with the music. He glances once more toward the terminal, at the lights, the people, the endless motion of life continuing without his permission, and smiles again, faint but real. The truck rolls forward, merging with the slow stream of traffic, looping around the airport exit. The road ahead glows faintly under streetlights, stretching into darkness. Outside, the runway lights burn steady in the distance, rows of them pulsing in rhythm, leading the way for anyone still searching for a place to land. The camera follows the truck from behind, small, steady, moving toward the city. Headlights fade gradually into the night, swallowed by the blue-gray air. No music swells. No words close the moment. Just the sound of the engine, smooth, resolved, carrying him forward. The final frame lingers on the runway lights, one last time, glowing like a constellation against the dark horizon. And as the scene fades to black, Edward's voice echoes one last thought, quiet but certain. Peace isn't given. You build it, mile by mile. Then silence. Revenge complete. Peace, finally self-earned.